Chapter 3110 Trading for Fruits. Chapter 3110 3110 Trading for Fruits. 3110 Trading for Fruits. Ling Han knew that his strength had increased too quickly, so the toughness of his body could not keep up. Others should not have such a problem. For others, their physique was also slowly becoming stronger at the same time that their cultivation level increased, so there was nothing to worry about. Ling Han went to where Sun Jianfang was. He did not dare to fully display his power, and only said that he had already opened up his second meridian, and was about to expand this meridian to its limit. Of course, Sun Jianfang was overjoyed. After giving him some encouragement, he gave him another meridian guiding fruit. "This is the last meridian guiding fruit," he said. The ancient Tao sect could harvest 10 meridian guiding fruits in a year. Even if he was the sect master, it was impossible for him to give all of them to Ling Han to use. "I understand." Ling Han left. He had already thought of a way to resolve the problem of the meridian guiding fruit. That day, he refined the meridian guiding fruit into alchemical pills and went to the black market. He set up a stall and wrote a few words on the ground. "I have the meridian guiding pill, and am willing to trade for the meridian guiding fruit." When everyone saw this, they immediately surrounded him. Who didn't know that the meridian guiding pill was more effective than the meridian guiding fruit? It was obvious from the price. The market price of the meridian guiding fruit was 100 jade seeds, and the price of the meridian guiding pill exceeded this number. Therefore, who wouldn't want to refine the meridian guiding fruit into alchemical pills? The problem was that no one could do it. Now, seeing Ling Han offer such conditions, others could naturally guess that Ling Han definitely had a way to refine the meridian guiding fruit into alchemical pills. This would allow him to make a huge profit. The key was that they themselves didn't know how to do it. Then, faced with a choice between a meridian guiding pill and a meridian guiding fruit, how would they choose? They would naturally choose the meridian guiding pill. Of course, no one would be foolish enough to bring the meridian guiding fruit here. However, after a short while, people left and came back again to commence a trade of the meridian guiding fruit. "I have a condition," one person said. "I know that you will definitely be able to refine the meridian guiding pill. My condition is that after you refine it, you have to sell me another one." Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, "All right." He had made a fortune, so he didn't mind giving others some benefits. Besides, this didn't break the rule that each person could only buy a single pill. Brother, Na Yang also came. This time, he was wearing a pig-headed mask. It seemed that he had a showman personality. "I also have a meridian guiding fruit here. Take it, but don't forget about me if there are benefit." Ling Han smiled faintly. Na Yang was definitely more knowledgeable about the ways of the world than the previous one. He had directly sold Ling Han a favor. "All right." Ling Han nodded. He planned to give one to Na Yang after refining the meridian guiding fruit into alchemical pills. Although he had brought 7 meridian guiding pills, in reality, only 3 people traded with him. With rough calculations, the ancient Tao sect had 10 meridian guiding fruits a year. 3 had been given to Ling Han by Sun Daofang, and 3 more had been traded to Ling Han. That meant that there were only 4 aside from those he had gotten. Perhaps the people with the treasured fruit had yet to receive the news, or perhaps the fruits had already been eaten. Ling Han temporarily closed his stall. In any case, he had 3 more meridian guiding fruits, so he could refine quite a few meridian guiding pills. After returning to his residence, he first went to refine pills. This time, he obtained 23 alchemical pills. His efficiency in refining pills could be said to have improved considerably. Young master," Ling Han had just entered through the door when he saw Huan Shui welcoming him excitedly. He couldn't help but smile, and asked, "What is it? Is the sky about to collapse?" Huan Shui was a little embarrassed that she had lost her composure. However, in the next moment, she became excited again, and said, "Young master, I sensed my meridians." "Very good." Ling Han nodded. He had seen this girl's hard work, and he was also very happy. However, Huan Shui's expression immediately darkened, and she said apologetically, "Young master, it's all my fault for being too stupid. I have consumed all 3 meridian guiding pills. Ling Han laughed loudly, waved his hand, and said, "It's fine. Here, I'll give you 3 more pills. You can take them after you've cultivated the level of 1 meridian to the extreme." Young master, Huan Shui was extremely excited. Even a proud prodigy like Li Changdan could only obtain 1 meridian guiding fruit every 2 years. And what about her? She had already obtained 6 meridian guiding pills in total. Meridian guiding pills were much more precious than meridian guiding fruits. She was extremely moved, and really wanted to give her heart and soul to Ling Han. "Since you've already sensed your meridians, report to the sect. From now on, you can become an official disciple of the sect," Ling Han said in a low voice. In this era, there were very few cultivators who could cultivate, so every one of them was very precious. As long as one could become a cultivator, their status would improve by leaps and bounds. A beauty like Huan Shui could be bought with just 1 jade seed. However, if it was a cultivator, one might need 10 jade seeds just to hire them. The difference was like heaven and earth. Plop. Huan Shui immediately knelt down and kowtowed continuously. "Young master, Huan Shui will follow you for the rest of my life. I can't repay your kindness even if I die 100 times. There was no one in the world who treated her better than Ling Han." Furthermore, Ling Han had never asked for anything. This was what truly made her completely loyal to Ling Han. She made up her mind. No matter what happened, she would always be Ling Han's maid. Ling Han smiled, and didn't force her. He had once been an ultimate elite, so he naturally had a mentality that belonged to an ultimate elite. Since Huan Shui insisted, he naturally wouldn't try to persuade her otherwise. What did this have to do with him? After some thought, he decided to take responsibility since he had decided to nurture this maid. Ling Han gave Huan Shui a spirit-gathering formation, and taught her how to use it. This was very simple. She didn't need any knowledge of formations. She just needed to set up the formation foundations and have enough jade seeds. Huan Shui was naturally moved to tears again. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. There was only one thought in her mind: if Ling Han was in danger, she was willing to take his place. Ling Han did not lack jade seeds for the time being, and he had also refined so many meridian guiding pills. This was enough to trade for a large number of jade seeds, which would support his cultivation for a very long time. He focused his attention on the demonic monkey fists. Every time he practiced this fist technique, he would gain a new appreciation. It was as if its power was limitless. Brother Monkey said that he obtained this from a bloodline inheritance. Then, what kind of great elite had appeared among his ancestors? Ling Han thought to himself. The prerequisite for a bloodline inheritance was that the bloodline had once produced an extremely impressive figure. Only then could it fundamentally affect the bloodline. Before this era, there was a martial arts civilization, but it disappeared for some reason. In that case, Brother Monkey's ancestors must have been from that era. What a pity. Brother Monkey must know a lot about that era. He just doesn't want to tell me. That's true. I'm too weak now. It's not good for me to know some things. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. Huan Shui hurriedly went to open the door. After a while, she led a young man over. "Junior brother Ling." This young man smiled at Ling Han, and then handed over an invitation. In a few days' time, it will be junior sister He Miaoyin's 18th birthday, and will also celebrate the fact that junior sister He has broken through to 6 meridians as well. Junior brother Ling is specially invited to attend. Chapter 3111, 3111 Attending the Banquet. Chapter 3111, 3111 Attending the Banquet. 3111 Attending the Banquet. Ling Han accepted the invitation, and the young man revealed a strange smile as he turned to leave. "Wait," Ling Han said. After the young man stopped, he asked, "How should I address you?" The young man turned around with an unhappy expression. "I'm your senior brother. When you speak to a senior brother, you should add the word please. Forget it, you've just entered the sect. I won't blame you this time. My surname is Pang, full name Pang Anhe." Ling Han ignored him, and only lowered his head to look at the invitation. Fuck. Pang Anhe instantly felt like he had thrown a punch into a ball of wool. This disregard made him so angry that he was about to explode. In a fit of anger, he even had the impulse to make a move. However, he recalled how Ling Han was the Lord Sect Master's most favored disciple, so even if anyone wanted to mess with him, how could he possibly jump out and be the first one? Forget it. In any case, Ling Han wouldn't be smug for very long. With a flourish of his sleeves, he left. Huan Shui escorted the guest out. The smile on her face had long disappeared as she glared at Pang Anhe. Right now, she wished she had the power to punch this bastard to death. How dared he disrespect her young master? Just you wait, I'll remember this. Ling Han didn't care at all. In the past, there had been plenty of proud prodigies who had put on airs and acted like big shots in front of him, but hadn't all of them been beaten into retards and slaughtered like weak chickens by him? He Miaoyin, the granddaughter of 7th Elder He Guan. No wonder there is such a big fuss over her 18th birthday. He Guan had advanced to 10 meridians 20 years ago, and became the last elder of the ancient Dao sect. His current cultivation level is unknown. Although Sun Jianfang treats me well, this has also aroused the jealousy of many people. To invite me to a banquet at this time, most of those attending probably don't have good intentions. Forget it, I'll go take a look. There were still 4 days before He Miaoyin's birthday banquet, and Ling Han continued to practice the demonic monkey fists while giving Huan Shui some pointers. Even though Huan Shui's talent wasn't high, her current cultivation didn't require much natural talent, either. As long as she could sense her meridians, all that was left for her to do was to work hard. This was especially true for one meridian. One only had to achieve 250 kilograms of strength, and Huan Shui wasn't a prodigy, so 250 kilograms of strength was indeed her limit. With the support of the Spirit Gathering formation, she had already completed the cultivation of one meridian by the 3rd day. After taking the 3 meridian guiding pills, she sensed her 2nd meridian, successfully opened the 2nd meridian, and entered the level of 2 meridians. By the 4th day, she already had 350 kilograms of strength. This was simply shocking. Only Ling Han would be so generous as to spend so many resources on a person with no natural talent. One had to know that 6 meridian guiding pills were enough to produce a 6 meridians. If others were to find out, they would definitely scold Ling Han for being wasteful. He was extravagant to the point of speechlessness. Meanwhile, Ling Han's strength had increased from 400 kg to 5,000 kg. This advancement was much faster than Huan Shui's, and he was comparable to a peak stage 6 meridians. And he had only opened up his 5th meridian at this point. He realized that his physique was rapidly becoming stronger. The precious fruits that he had eaten previously should have been completely digested, and no longer had any effect, right? Why was his physique still rapidly improving? It didn't make sense. He thought for a long time, and felt that this was the effect of the unknown cultivation technique. Brother Monkey had said that there were many advantages to it. Enhancing one's physique should be one of them. However, Ling Han could not keep calling it the unknown cultivation technique, right? I'll call it Brother Monkey cultivation technique. Ling Han nodded. If the Empress and the others knew about this, they would definitely say that no matter where this fellow was, he was still as incompetent at naming as ever. Huan Shui, let's go. Seeing that it was getting late, Ling Han beckoned to his little handmaiden. Huan Shui can go too. Huan Shui was excited. With her status, she was not qualified to attend events like banquets, unless it was Ling Han that held a banquet. Then, as a servant, she could attend, but she would also be working. Ling Han nodded. With his protective personality, since Huan Shui was one of his people, she was more noble than anyone else in his eyes. All right, young master. Huan Shui will go change immediately. Huan Shui ran off in a flash. The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched slightly. As expected, as long as it was a woman, she would love to look beautiful. Wasn't it just going to attend a banquet? Did she need to specially change her clothes? After a while, Huan Shui appeared. She had changed into a clean red dress, and a small white bag was slung over her shoulder. Her face was slightly powdered, making her look even fairer. Her red lips were rosy and bright, and her eyes had somehow grown larger. This makeup, TSK. If Huan Shui could originally be considered a beauty worth 70 marks, then she was now at least a beauty worth 80 marks. This makeup really wasn't wasted on her. Young master, Huan Shui was a little embarrassed to be stared at by her young master. Let's go. Ling Han smiled and took the lead. Huan Shui hurriedly followed behind him. She didn't dare to walk alongside Ling Han, and instead fell a step behind, bearing in mind her position as a maid. However, Ling Han had just stepped out of the door when he stopped. Young master? Ling Han smiled awkwardly. Where does he Miaoyin live? Phut, Huan Shui immediately laughed. This young master was really interesting. She didn't dare to tease him, and quickly pointed the way. The two of them left. The ancient Dao sect was actually very large. Most of the buildings here had appeared after the earthquake. They were products of the previous civilization. However, there were also some that were built now and imitated the ancient style, but because they were too new, they could be clearly distinguished with a glance. After walking for about 20 minutes, they arrived in front of a large courtyard. This was obviously a newly built structure because it was huge. The ancient buildings were all small courtyards, but this one was at least 5 times larger, and the paint on the exterior walls and such was very new. At the door, 2 servants were welcoming guests. They were wearing very strange clothes, with the ends of their clothes resembling a swallow's tail. They also wore a cloth collar. Ling Han learned about the civilization from 100 years ago from the optical computer. Those clothes were called tuxedos, and they were only worn by high-class families when they held banquets. The cloth collars around their necks were called bow ties, and there was another type called ties, which was similar to this, but a long strip of cloth would hang down from it, making it even stranger. There were many guests entering, most of them in pairs. The men were basically dressed in a suit, while the women's clothes were of all kinds and varieties. Some of them even revealed their fair thighs and backs, and even their chests were almost half exposed, which made Ling Han very surprised. The women here were really too open. Ling Han walked over and handed over the invitation. A servant took it, and immediately made a gesture to invite him in. So it's young Master Ling. Please. Ling Han went first, and Huan Shui hurriedly followed, appearing extremely cautious. Although she was already a cultivator, she still couldn't change her mentality of a servant for the moment. Ha ha ha, what a joke. Someone actually brought a maid over. Immediately, a young man laughed loudly. The female companion beside him also covered her mouth and chuckled, appearing very reserved in her amusement. However, the disdainful gaze she shot at Huan Shui already showed her attitude. Chapter 3112, 3112 Apologize. Chapter 3112, 3112 Apologize. 3112 Apologize. Even if you can't find a partner, there's no need to find a maid, right? Aren't you ashamed to bring her to such an occasion? The young man continued mockingly. His female companion also said, ugly ducklings are ugly ducklings, after all. They can't change even if they wear the clothes of a princess. Ha ha ha. This wasn't the main hall of the banquet, but because it was the peak period of the banquet, there were still quite a few people around. When they heard this, they all burst into laughter. However, because they did not know Ling Han's identity and background, everyone only smiled and watched the show. No one wanted to stand out. Who knew if Ling Han was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Huan Shui's strength had increased, but her mentality was far from being able to keep up with her boost in strength. Faced with such ridicule, her first reaction was that she had embarrassed Ling Han, causing her to lower her head in discomfort. Her feet could not help but retreat, as long as she could distance herself from Ling Han, she could draw a clear line between the two of them. Apologize. However, right at this moment, she heard Ling Han's shout, and her heart trembled. You want me to apologize? The young man pointed at himself, and couldn't help but laugh. Who do you think you are? Don't you know respect for seniority? He had never seen Ling Han before, so there was only one possibility. Ling Han should be a new disciple. Then, according to the rules of the ancient Dao sect, the first to enter the sect was considered the elder disciple, and the strong were to be respected. Why would he need to care about Ling Han's anger? Moreover, he also wanted to show off in front of his female companion. She was a young lady from a wealthy family in the town. Her family was in the food business. Although she wasn't a cultivator, she was very rich. Marrying her would be of great help to him in the future. Linghan looked at him, and his gaze was very cold. I'll say it again. Apologize. Haha, let alone once, so what if you repeat it 10,000 times? Do you know who I am, junior, brother? He stretched out his hand, wanting to poke Linghan in the chest. Linghan reached out, grabbed the other's 5 fingers, and then twisted them. Ah, the young man immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. As the saying went, the fingers were connected to the heart, and the pain immediately went straight to his heart. Huan Shui saw this, and couldn't help but tear up again. She was extremely touched. Young master, she said softly, wanting to call out to Linghan. She was afraid that Linghan would be at a disadvantage. Linghan turned his head and smiled at her. Naturally, he would not let it go. How could someone as protective as him watch the people around him just suffer quietly? What are you doing? Hurry up and let go, the young man's female companion hurriedly said. Who would have thought that Linghan would suddenly make a move? It had to be known that this was not only the ancient Dao sect, but also He Miaoyin's birthday banquet. If they caused trouble here, wouldn't they offend the He family? Linghan looked towards her, and said, apologize. What? The woman couldn't help but retreat. Although Linghan's expression wasn't terrifying at all, that cold and emotionless look made her feel a chill rise from the bottom of her heart. Pa! Linghan slapped her across the face. A streak of blood flew, and the woman was already sent flying by his slap. Her hair was completely messed up, and there was a clear palm print on her left cheek. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. Everyone drew a sharp intake of breath. This lord was truly overbearing. The other party had only mocked him a little, and he already slapped her. Don't you know that this is He Miaoyin's house? Don't you know that today is He Miaoyin's birthday? Apologize. Linghan continued, his voice cold and emotionless. The woman was about to go crazy. She had suffered such a slap, yet she still had to apologize. Linghan tugged at the young man. Ah! As the young man cried out in pain, he moved closer to the woman and slapped her again. Pa! The slap rang out crisp and loud. Apologize. Linghan said again. I am sorry. The woman admitted defeat and cried. Not to me, but to her. Linghan pointed at Huan Shui. The woman's mouth was half open, and her face was filled with unwillingness. He wanted her to apologize to a servant. Then how would she be able to hold her head up again in the future? Pa! The third slap was delivered. The woman finally understood that she had met a god of calamity who did not know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. I'm sorry, she said to Huan Shui. Only then did Linghan stop staring at her, and picked up the young man in his hands. Pa! He first slapped him 3 times, and then said, apologize. That young man's face was filled with resentment. After being humiliated by Linghan like this, he had completely lost his dignity. In the future, could he still hold his head high? Pa! Linghan didn't care. If the man wouldn't apologize, fine, he would slap him until he did. Linghan's refusal to talk reason finally made the young man feel fear. He had a feeling that he would be beaten to death. He was depressed. No matter what, he was still a 2 meridians cultivator, but because he had underestimated Linghan too much, he had actually been taken down before he could even make a single move. This made him unwilling and dissatisfied. I'm sorry. He gritted his teeth. Pa! Linghan slapped him again, causing the young man's mouth to half open. He felt as if his heart was filled with. Didn't I fucking apologize? You dragged on for too long, so I need to add some interest, Linghan said calmly. Fuck, there was such a thing. The onlookers all thought to themselves that if their strength was inferior to this person's, they absolutely could not become enemies with Linghan. Otherwise, they would be in dire straits. This guy was truly overbearing. But on the other hand, wasn't it the couple who had asked for it? Did Linghan offend them? Linghan shook his right hand, and the young man was thrown out, landing heavily on the ground. The young man got up. He was still a gentleman, so he first checked on his female companion, and asked, Xiaomai, Are you alright? Alright. The woman pointed at her face. You call this alright? Jong Baichuan, are you still a man? Of course, the young man was Jong Baichuan. His face was ferocious as he gritted his teeth, and said, Xiaomai, don't worry. I'll definitely avenge you. He turned to face Ling Han, and said balefully, I want to duel with you. Gasp. Gasps rang out all around them. In the sect, everyone would naturally spar with each other to increase their actual combat experience. However, when they were sparring, no one would be ruthless. If they injured or even killed someone, they would definitely have to pay compensation. However, a duel was different. One was responsible for his own life or death. From the moment he opened his mouth, Jong Baichuan declared his intentions of a duel. It was obvious that he was too angry. Ling Han glanced at him, shook his head, and strode off. You don't dare! Jong Baichuan roared. You're not worthy, Ling Han said calmly. You. Jong Baichuan was infuriated. He chased after Ling Han with a quick step, and aimed a punch at the back of Ling Han's head. Ling Han didn't make a move. In fact, his steps didn't change in the slightest. Jong Baichuan couldn't help but smile. You're so arrogant. Do you really think I won't dare to make a move? Just as he was about to land a solid punch, a fair and tender fist suddenly swung over to meet his fist. Boom. He was instantly knocked back, and he felt his blood boil. Jong Baichuan focused his gaze, and couldn't help but stare. He saw that behind Ling Han, there was a young girl maintaining her posture of having delivered a punch. It was Huan Shui. Chapter 31:11, 31:11 Attending the Banquet. Chapter 31:11, 31:11 Attending the Banquet. 31:11 Attending the Banquet. Ling Han accepted the invitation, and the young man revealed a strange smile as he turned to leave. Wait, Ling Han said. After the young man stopped, he asked, How should I address you? The young man turned around with an unhappy expression. I'm your senior brother. When you speak to a senior brother, you should add the word please. Forget it, you've just entered the sect. I won't blame you this time. My surname is Pang, full name Pang Anhe. Ling Han ignored him, and only lowered his head to look at the invitation. Fuck. Pang Anhe instantly felt like he had thrown a punch into a ball of wool. This disregard made him so angry that he was about to explode. In a fit of anger, he even had the impulse to make a move. However, he recalled how Ling Han was the Lord Sect Master's most favored disciple, so even if anyone wanted to mess with him, how could he possibly jump out and be the first one? Forget it. In any case, Ling Han wouldn't be smug for very long. With a flourish of his sleeves, he left. Huan Shui escorted the guest out. The smile on her face had long disappeared as she glared at Pang Anhe. Right now, she wished she had the power to punch this bastard to death. How dared he disrespect her young master? Just you wait, I'll remember this. Ling Han didn't care at all. In the past, there had been plenty of proud prodigies who had put on airs and acted like big shots in front of him, but hadn't all of them been beaten into retards and slaughtered like weak chickens by him? He Miaoyin, the granddaughter of 7th Elder He Guan. No wonder there is such a big fuss over her 18th birthday. He Guan had advanced to 10 meridians 20 years ago, and became the last elder of the ancient Dao sect. His current cultivation level is unknown. Although Sun Jianfang treats me well, this has also aroused the jealousy of many people. To invite me to a banquet at this time, most of those attending probably don't have good intentions. Forget it, I'll go take a look. There were still 4 days before He Miaoyin's birthday banquet, and Ling Han continued to practice the demonic monkey fists while giving Huan Shui some pointers. Even though Huan Shui's talent wasn't high, her current cultivation didn't require much natural talent, either. As long as she could sense her meridians, all that was left for her to do was to work hard. This was especially true for one meridian. One only had to achieve 250 kilograms of strength, and Huan Shui wasn't a prodigy, so 250 kilograms of strength was indeed her limit. With the support of the Spirit Gathering formation, she had already completed the cultivation of one meridian by the 3rd day. After taking the 3 meridian guiding pills, she sensed her 2nd meridian, successfully opened the 2nd meridian, and entered the level of 2 meridians. By the fourth day, she already had 350 kilograms of strength. This was simply shocking. Only Ling Han would be so generous as to spend so many resources on a person with no natural talent. One had to know that 6 meridian guiding pills were enough to produce a 6 meridians. If others were to find out, they would definitely scold Ling Han for being wasteful. He was extravagant to the point of speechlessness. Meanwhile, Ling Han's strength had increased from 400 kilogram to 5,000 kilograms. This advancement was much faster than Huan Xue's, and he was comparable to a peak stage 6 meridians. And he had only opened up his 5th meridian at this point. He realized that his physique was rapidly becoming stronger. The precious fruits that he had eaten previously should have been completely digested, and no longer had any effect, right? Why was his physique still rapidly improving? It didn't make sense. He thought for a long time, and felt that this was the effect of the unknown cultivation technique. Brother Monkey had said that there were many advantages to it. Enhancing one's physique should be one of them. However, Ling Han could not keep calling it the unknown cultivation technique, right? I'll call it Brother Monkey cultivation technique. Ling Han nodded. If the Empress and the others knew about this, they would definitely say that no matter where this fellow was, he was still as incompetent at naming as ever. Huan Xue, let's go. That person is Ling Han, right? Someone recognized Ling Han. After all, when Ling Han had appeared back then, many people had gone to see him. This person had jumped out from the divine stone, so who wouldn't be curious about him? Yes, that's him. It's only been a month, but he already seems very impressive. It can't be helped. Don't you know that Lord Sect Master gave him a meridian guiding fruit? It's 2 meridian guiding fruits, okay? Pei, it's 3. No wonder he could fight Zhong Baichuan. So he has advanced to 2 meridians. As long as one can sense his meridians, 1 month is enough time for him to advance into 2 meridians. Comparisons are really infuriating. I only get 1 meridian guiding fruit every 4 to 5 years. Furthermore, Lord Sect Master actually sent a disciple of 2 meridians to be Ling Han's maid. What favoritism! Everyone sighed with emotion. They naturally did not believe that Huan Xue was a maidservant, but rather that she was some junior sister of the sect that had been sent to protect Ling Han. Huan Xue, come back, Ling Han said. There was really no need to waste time on a nobody like Zhong Baichuan. Huan Xue immediately stopped and retreated to Ling Han's side. Stretch out your hands, Ling Han said. Huan Xue stretched out her hands, and 3 of her 10 fingers were dislocated. Ling Han pressed her fingers back into position one by one, and cracking sounds rang out. Huan Xue gritted her teeth, and didn't say a word. She only broke out in cold sweat from the pain. Fortunately, they were only dislocated, and everything would be fine once they were pushed back into place. Let's go. Ling Han strode forward, and Huan Xue hurriedly followed. Seeing the 2 of them disappear around the corner, everyone looked at each other, their hearts palpitating in shock. However, Ling Han's cultivation time is too short. At most, his only are 3 meridians. That is completely insufficient in the sect. I heard that a few veteran senior brothers and senior sisters want to mess with him this time. He will definitely suffer today. Hehe, let's just wait and see the show. Everyone followed him in. As for Zhong Baichuan and Xiaomai, no one cared. This world never sympathized with losers. The victors would take away all attention, and the losers could only lick their own wounds. Ling Han entered the main hall, and saw that it was truly magnificent. From the outside, it looked like an ancient building, but the interior was extremely modern. It was the same style as before the great change that had happened more than 100 years ago. The marble floor tiles were covered with thick carpets, and there was no sound at all when one stepped on them. Oil paintings hung all around on the walls. Most of them were probably fakes because most of the real ones had probably been destroyed in the chaotic era of the past. Unusually, there was a huge photo hanging in the middle of one wall. It was of a young girl. She was quite good-looking, and exuded an incomparably arrogant aura. This was the main lead of today, He Miaoyin. It seemed that this girl was quite narcissistic. The hall was filled with youngsters holding tall wine glasses in their hands and walking back and forth. There were also attendants shuttling through the crowd, holding trays filled with wine glasses in their hands. The guests could take a glass as they walked past. There was music playing, but no musicians could be seen. It was something called a music player. It could store sound and play it at any time. Of course, there was a prerequisite for this electricity. Junior brother Li Changdan appeared. He was tall and slender, and his temperament was outstanding. It was as if he had a halo above his head. No matter where he stood, he was incomparably dazzling, and attracted the attention of countless people. His eyes were sharp, so he quickly spotted Ling Han, and strode over. Like a cluster of stars surrounding the moon, Li Changdan was surrounded by everyone, completely suppressing Ling Han in bearing. Chapter 3114, 3114 Theft. Chapter 3114, 3114 Theft. 3114 Theft. Li Changdan, a proud prodigy. He was only 21 years old, but he had already opened 9 meridians. No one in the ancient Tao sect could surpass such a young person of 9 meridians. This was a man who was born with a halo around him. He was destined to be brilliant and dazzling. If Ling Han hadn't appeared, he would definitely have been made the Tao child and inherited the legacy of the ancient Tao sect. He would have been able to obtain the core inheritance and reach the peak of existence. Unfortunately, Sun Jianfang had brought back a divine stone which had actually nurtured a person. This had caught Li Changdan off guard, and might have even caused his status as the Tao child to fly away. He was naturally displeased with Ling Han, but he was extremely shrewd. In the ancient Tao sect, who would dare to make a move under Sun Jianfang's nose? Fortunately, Ling Han had only just started, and was still far inferior to him. Li Changdan didn't believe that before Ling Han caught up to him, those elders of the sect would agree to make Ling Han the Tao child. The Tao child would represent the next generation of a sect. Of course, they had to establish the one who was strongest and had the greatest potential as the Tao child. The changes in this world had just begun, and the path to immortality was an endless one. They were only standing at the starting point, and the resources should naturally be spent on the most suitable people, such as Li Changdan. Thus, after learning that Sun Jianfang had given Ling Han 3 meridian guiding fruits, even with Li Changdan's shrewdness, he still couldn't bear it. As he instructed, the matter of He Miaoyin inviting Ling Han to the banquet happened. Of course, it was so that he could make things difficult for Ling Han. It would be best if he could humiliate Ling Han to the point that the latter could no longer stay in the ancient Tao sect. At the very least, he had to make Ling Han's reputation stink. If that happened, how could he continue to become the Tao child? "Come, junior brother Ling, let me introduce you," Li Changdan said with a smile. He was gentle and refined like a modest gentleman, and people couldn't help but have a favorable impression of him. "This is Rui Yuanliang, senior brother Rui," he said, pointing to a young man beside him. This person was about 24 to 25 years old, and his face was filled with arrogance, as if he did not take Ling Han seriously at all. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Senior brother Rui." Rui Yuanliang only snorted softly, and raised his chin slightly as a form of greeting. Ling Han sneered in his heart. "Is it really okay for you to be so arrogant? What's the big deal about you? Senior brother Rui is Elder Chi's son-in-law. His natural talent in martial arts is quite extraordinary, and is already an elder of 8 meridians now," Li Changdan continued. Rui Yuanliang revealed a reserved smile and nodded slightly at Li Changdan. Oh, so he was a freeloader that was living off of his wife. What was there to be arrogant about that? "This is Laro Lian, senior brother Laro," Li Changdan introduced again. Ling Han was too lazy to even nod. These people were all arrogant, and they seemed to be either the descendants or in-laws of the elders. They thought that their status was so very noble, so why should he be bothered to act polite to them? "Humph, how arrogant," Laro Lian said in dissatisfaction. These people were all too selfish. Didn't they know who was the one who put on airs first? "This junior brother is really arrogant," another man said. "Don't think that you can be arrogant just because Lord Sect Master dotes on you." Ling Han glanced at him and asked, "And who are you?" "Tan Gaobua," the man said proudly. "Never heard of you," Ling Han said calmly, and then turned his face away. "You, Tan Gaobua," and the others were furious. No matter how much Sun Jianfang thought highly of Ling Han, the latter had only stepped onto the path of martial arts for less than a month. Naturally, he should maintain absolute respect and modesty in front of these senior brothers. Moreover, they were all the descendants and in-laws of the elders. Just how high was their status? "As long as you are not the Dao child, what right do you have to be arrogant in front of us?" All right. Li Changdan waved his hand to stop the conflict from intensifying. "Junior brother Ling is young and impetuous. Don't blame him." This seemed to be speaking up for Ling Han, but it was actually pointing out his arrogance. It was equivalent to adding fuel to the fire. Ling Han looked at this young prodigy from the ancient Dao sect. He was young, but his shrewdness was truly profound. Tan Gaobua and the others all wore displeased expressions, and their gazes towards Ling Han were filled with disgust. In their eyes, Ling Han was only a lucky person. Because he had been born from the divine stone, he had inexplicably obtained Sun Jianfang's favor. It was too unfair. They looked at each other, and then sneered. They would definitely make a fool of this kid and ruin his reputation. "Junior sister, he has come." Right at this moment, someone spoke, and a woman in red walked out surrounded by 4 beauties. They were all wearing off-shoulder dresses, revealing fair shoulders. One could see their proudly bulging breasts presenting an extremely alluring sight. This couldn't help but cause many men to howl like wolves and cheer with all their might. The woman in red was He Miaoyin, today's female lead. She walked to the middle of the hall, and said a few opening words before announcing the start of the banquet so that everyone could have fun. Ling Han had no interest in paying attention to anyone, and just sat at the side. Huan Shui, on the other hand, was doing her job as a little maid. Once Ling Han gave the word, she would go and bring over Ling Han's favorite food. This made everyone envious. By now, everyone had heard about what had happened. Huan Shui had defeated Zhong Baichuan, who was a 2 meridians, so she at least had the strength of 2 meridians. In this era, cultivators were the most precious resource. Regardless of their cultivation level, they were superior in status, yet Huan Shui was actually serving Ling Han like a maidservant, willing to work without complaint. How could this not make people envious? The banquet continued, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. There were no more conflicts, which surprised Ling Han greatly. There was actually no one who came to provoke him. This didn't make sense. He was someone with a halo of trouble. When the banquet was about to end, He Miaoyin returned to her room. However, when she appeared again, her pretty face was icy. The door was immediately closed, and the music stopped playing. What's going on? What happened? Everyone was curious and started asking around. After a while, they were all in a commotion. It turned out that He Miaoyin's meridian guiding pill had been stolen. It was said that this meridian guiding pill was a gift from He Guan to his granddaughter for her birthday in attaining adulthood. Now that it had been stolen, He Miaoyin was naturally enraged. Now that the door was closed, the meaning was obvious. The thief was among them. "I'm sorry, everyone. We're going to search everyone now." Although everyone was dissatisfied, they couldn't afford to offend the He family. Moreover, they didn't have a guilty conscience, so they naturally didn't mind being searched so they could prove their innocence. Ling Han raised his eyebrows slightly. Could this be a plot against him? When someone walked over and wanted to search him, he didn't object. He just strictly paid attention to whether the other party took the opportunity to frame him. To his surprise, he completed the body search smoothly. Was he thinking too much? Found it. A voice rang out. A woman was standing beside Huan Shui with a bottle in her hand. There was a pill inside. Chapter 31:15, 31:15 framed. Chapter 31:15, 3115 framed. 3115 framed. He Miaoyin had just lost a meridian guiding pill, and found a bottle which contained an alchemical pill on Huan Shui. Was there such a coincidence in the world? She must be the thief. Ling Han frowned. He naturally believed that the little handmaiden was not a thief. This was an obvious attempt to frame her. He had miscalculated. He didn't expect that he wasn't the target, but rather his maid was. As the saying went, even if you hit a dog, you had to look at the owner first. If he interfered, then with evidence, he would only be dragged down into the mud as well. He might even be thought to be the mastermind behind it. And if he did not do anything, then everyone would look down on him. If he could not even save his own subordinate, how could such a person be worthy of becoming the Tao child? Bulsh *T. Ling Han looked towards Li Changdan. Had this gentle and refined-looking person come up with this idea? He Miaoyin came over aggressively and appeared in front of Huan Shui. She raised her hand, and was about to slap her. However, her hand didn't land. It wasn't because she was soft-hearted, but because there was another person in front of Huan Shui. It was Ling Han. Get lost. He Miaoyin said coldly. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "This is my maid, so it's not your place to discipline her." Hiss, everyone exclaimed in their hearts. Was Ling Han really going to go against He Miaoyin for the sake of a maid? How dare you? He Miaoyin sneered. Someone beside her came over and told her Ling Han's identity. She gave an "oh" and said, "So you're Ling Han. No wonder you dare to be impudent in front of me. However, do you think I'm afraid of you?" Her face was full of pride. "Now I wonder if you are the mastermind behind this. Are you the one who ordered this b'TCH to steal what belongs to me? And now that you are trying so hard to protect her, you want to cover up the truth, right?" "I didn't steal it," Huan Shui said anxiously. "Humph, you have been caught red-handed, and you still want to deny it." He Miaoyin glanced at Huan Shui with disdain. "That's right. We've caught you red-handed. How are you going to deny it?" Rui Yuanliang said with a smile. "Sigh, I really didn't expect junior brother Ling to be such a person." Lao Lian chimed in, directly targeting Ling Han. "Hee. Tan Gaobo merely twitched his lips with a fake smile. Li Changdan revealed a pained expression, and said, "Junior brother Ling, how can you be so foolish?" He shook his head and turned to He Miaoyin. "Junior sister, can you let this matter go on my account? Senior brother will think of a way to give you a meridian guiding pill." Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. They felt a strong sense of respect for Li Changdan. Look, this was the real person that they publicly acknowledged as a prodigy of the ancient Tao sect. It clearly had nothing to do with him, yet he had taken on this matter to intercede on Ling Han's behalf. In fact, in order to exonerate Ling Han, he had even taken on the debt of a meridian guiding pill. One had to know that he was a 9 meridians, and he needed the meridian guiding fruit and the meridian guiding pill the most. If he obtained them, he would definitely consume them himself. But now, he was willing to give them away for the sake of his junior brother who was from the same sect. How could they not admire such generosity and kindness? "Senior brother Li," many people shouted. It was great to have such a senior brother in the sect. In the future, he would definitely be able to become a giant tree that supported the ancient Tao sect and protected them from the storms raging outside. "All right, for senior brother Li's sake, I won't pursue this matter any further," He Miaoyin said as her beautiful eyes swept over Ling Han and Huan Shui, revealing deep disdain and ridicule. "You're really lucky to have senior brother Li to speak up for you. Otherwise, HMPH. She was still angry. To think that they actually dared to steal from her. "Get lost, don't let me see you again." Ling Han smiled faintly. Li Changdan really did things beautifully. Not only did he show off his greatness, but he also gave him a blow at the same time, confirming that Ling Han and Huan Shui had colluded with each other, and their supposed crime of theft. In this way, no matter how much Sun Jianfang liked Ling Han, how could he have the cheek to make him the Tao child? Wouldn't he be afraid of being laughed at if word got out? Wait. Ling Han waved his hand. He had never been the type to allow others to bully him. They wanted to frame him? Hehe, didn't they know that he had an attribute of being extremely lucky? You people are really audacious. Ling Han shook his head and pointed at the bottle as he said, "This was clearly something I bestowed upon my little handmaiden. When did it become stolen goods? Is this a blatant robbery of what is originally mine?" "Ah, Everyone was shocked. What was going on? Logically speaking, even if Ling Han didn't accept this favor from Li Changdan, he should still try his best to disassociate himself from this bottle and that alchemical pill. He could even say that he had been framed. However, Ling Han actually said this. This was truly beyond everyone's expectations. Was he courting death? Even Li Changdan didn't expect this. This matter had gone completely out of his control. He felt a sense of unease that things might develop in an unknown direction. However, he immediately shook his head. After Ling Han admitted it, wouldn't that be even more impossible to refute? Humph, I'd like to see how you court death. He Miaoyin was furious. This thief stole from her, and still dared to make a false countercharge. You scoundrel, how dare you slander me? Fine, fine, fine. If I don't punish you today, my name won't be He Miaoyin, she balefully said. She was already infuriated. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, since you all say that this is stolen goods, I would like to ask you, how do you prove that this is your alchemical pill? Is there any need to prove it? Everyone shook their head in their hearts. Ling Han's counterattack or, rather excuse, was too weak. Oh, He Miaoyin just said that a meridian guiding pill was stolen, and she found it on your maid. Is there such a coincidence in this world? He Miaoyin suppressed her anger, and asked indifferently, let me ask you, what alchemical pill is this? The meridian guiding pill, Ling Han said. Since he had been framed, this pill was definitely the meridian guiding pill. Everyone was stunned for a moment. You even admitted it yourself. What else was there to say? Humph, humph. He Miaoyin sneered. She couldn't be bothered to continue speaking. It was a complete waste of time. Everyone looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at a fool. How could such a person become the Tao child? What kind of joke was this? If he were to inherit the position of sect master, they would only be crushed to death by the rolling wheels of the Great Era. Huan Shui, on the other hand, was extremely anxious. If killing herself could help Ling Han resolve this problem, she would give up her life without hesitation. NDSVLM. Ling Han laughed, took out a bottle from his shirt, and said, I have another meridian guiding pill here. Could it be that you guys are saying that I stole it again? Hey! Why was there another meridian guiding pill? Ling Han took out another pill bottle, and said, if it's not enough, there's still one more. Yes, there's another here too. He took out the third pill bottle. The meridian guiding pills were too precious, and it was not safe to leave them in his rooms, so Ling Han kept them close. Everyone was dumbfounded. Was this for real? So many of them were all meridian guiding pills? If these meridian guiding pills were real, then this matter was really undecided. Chapter 31:16, 31:16 Tables Turned. Chapter 31:16, 3116 Tables Turned. 31:16 Tables Turned. What was going on? The maid was clearly caught red-handed, but why did the quantity of stolen goods exceed the quantity that she should have? Humph, just because you say this is a meridian guiding pill, does that mean it's genuinely a meridian guiding pill? He Miaoyin asked coldly. Of course. Ling Han appeared extremely confident. Why should I believe you? He Miaoyin said disdainfully. One had to know that this meridian guiding fruit was something that her grandfather had paid a huge price to obtain. What right did Ling Han, a disciple who had just entered the sect, have to obtain it, and even having obtained 3 of them? Get someone to appraise it, someone said. Everyone nodded in agreement. Getting someone to appraise it would resolve the matter, simple as that. Ask who to appraise. Let me do it. A young man stepped forward. He was quite good-looking, but there was a cunning expression on his face. Hey, this voice sounds a little familiar. Brother Nai, Rui Yuanliang, Lao Lian, and the others dare not treat him lightly, and collectively cupped their hands in greeting. Ling Han immediately remembered that this guy was Nai Yang. This guy seemed to have a powerful background, so it was normal for him to be invited to He Miaoyin's birthday banquet today. Nai Yang seemed to have a high status among these second-generation young masters, so when he wanted to be the appraiser, the others were extremely confident of his ability to do so. However, in Ling Han's eyes, no matter how he looked at it, This guy seemed to be quite incompetent and unreliable. Na Yang uncorked the bottles one by one. After comparing them carefully, he said, based on my experience, these 4 are all meridian guiding pills. What? Everyone was shocked. They were all genuine. Hiss, wasn't it said that Sun Jianfang had only given Ling Han 3 meridian guiding fruits? Could it be that there were still other meridian guiding pills? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, couldn't I have asked someone to refine it to produce a pill? This explanation was indeed reasonable, but the problem was, when did the ancient Tao sect have a formation alchemist? No, there really is. Yes, a few days ago, a mysterious person was selling meridian guiding pills in the black market. Moreover, he even traded pills for fruits. Clearly, he must have mastered the refining method of the meridian guiding pill. Some people immediately spoke up. What? There's really someone selling meridian guiding pills? Some people weren't aware of this, so they were naturally very surprised. If Ling Han knows this person, then it wouldn't be strange for him to get this person to refine the meridian guiding fruit into a pill. So long as 1 meridian guiding fruit was refined, it ought to produce at least 3 or 4 pills, right? Therefore, it wouldn't be surprising that 3 meridian guiding fruits could produce 4 meridian guiding pills. Everyone nodded, all of them leaning towards the fact that these meridian guiding pills were acquired by Ling Han through a trade. By the way, do you know who that woman is? Someone pointed at Huan Shui. Isn't she some junior sister from the sect? Wrong. She's actually a maid. More than a month ago, when I went to Ling Han's place, I saw her with my own eyes. Hey, now that you mention it, I remember too. There is indeed such a maid. Hiss. Everyone gasped in astonishment. The former maid had now become a 2 meridians elite. What did this mean? Ling Han had to have many meridian guiding pills in his hands, which directly caused his maid to dash into becoming a 2 meridians. They were about to cry. How extravagant could you be? No matter how many meridian guiding pills you possess, how could you squander them like this? How good would it be for him to give it to them? With their natural talent in martial arts, the same amount of meridian guiding pills would definitely be more effective on them. Therefore, it wouldn't be strange that Huan Shui had a meridian guiding pill on her. It was probably leftovers from what she had been given. I really want to be bestowed with one too. Everyone looked at Ling Han eagerly. If not for the fact that their status as cultivators did not allow them to do so, they would all have the urge to hug Ling Han's thigh and become his lackeys. Li Chongdan was speechless. This matter was resolved just like that. As far as he was concerned, there was no solution to this, but Ling Han had taken care of it effortlessly. He naturally knew very well that the meridian guiding pill found on Huan Shui indeed belonged to He Miaoyin because it was stolen by Rui Yuanliang and the other 2, and the 3 of them did not hide this matter from him. It was too fucking strange. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, now surely my little handmaiden's innocence can be proven? He Miaoyin had nothing to say. She had heard it just now. Huan Shui was originally a maid, but now she had become a 2 meridians. How many meridian guiding pills would he have to spend to nurture a person with ordinary aptitude into a 2 meridians? Who would believe that such a wealthy person would steal her meridian guiding pill? Even she wouldn't be able to believe it. Ling Han swept his gaze over the crowd. No one said anything else as they all lowered their heads. He then turned his gaze to He Miaoyin, and said, since this is a completely false accusation, then apologize to my maid. He Miaoyin was stunned. What? He even wanted her to apologize. What did she do wrong? Her possession had been stolen. Could it be that it was wrong for her to search for what she had lost? Ling Han said, it's naturally not wrong for you to be looking for lost items, but it's wrong for you to verbally insult someone before you've figured out the situation. He had not forgotten that He Miaoyin had previously called Huan Shui AB*TCH. Who could be allowed to humiliate his maid? He had to slap her back in retribution of the insult she had hurled at his maid. Only then did He Miaoyin remember, and she couldn't help revealing a proud expression. So what if I wronged her? She's just a servant, can't I scold her? I don't care who she was in the past, but now she's my maid. You insulting her is equivalent to insulting me. Ling Han's expression became menacing, and his gaze was sharp as a sword as he stared straight at He Miaoyin. Do you think I'm easy to bully? Under his gaze, He Miaoyin couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Was this really a young man? Why did she feel that the other party was an ancient monster, a terrifying demonic beast that was currently at the peak of its cultivation? It made her feel an extreme chill from the bottom of her heart. A smile appeared on the corners of Ling Han's mouth, and he said, "Junior sister He, do you not know that the sect has rules? To humiliate a fellow disciple, what kind of serious crime is this?" Over the past few days, he had been tinkering with the optical computer whenever he was free. He already acquired quite an in-depth understanding of this world. Since he was now in the ancient Tao sect, how could he not make himself understand the rules of the sect? He Miaoyin was stunned. In the sect, humiliating a fellow disciple was a serious crime. If things were to really escalate, even if she was the granddaughter of an elder, she would still be punished. She would definitely be whipped at the mountain gate. Under her grandfather's protection, she believed that it wouldn't hurt even if she was whipped a few times. However, the problem was, how embarrassing would that be? She quickly calmed herself down, and said, "I was not insulting you," it was directed at her. She pointed at Huan Shui. Ling Han nodded, and said, "It's good that you admit it." "What did I admit?" He Miaoyin was getting a bad feeling. Ling Han said calmly, "According to the rules of the sect, as long as one's meridians could be detected, whether it's in a gardener, servant, or coachman, one will automatically be promoted to become a disciple of the sect. Therefore, in the case of my maid, she is also a disciple of the sect. Since you've admitted to insulting her, do you still want to deny it in front of so many people?" He Miaoyin was speechless. For a moment, her heart was filled with panic, and her mind seemed to have gone blank. "Apologize." Ling Han raised his voice. This shout was like the roll of thunder. He Miaoyin's heart was in a chaotic state. She blurted out, "I'm sorry." Chapter 3117, 3117 Reforging the Meridians. Chapter 3117, 3117 Reforging the Meridians. 3117 Reforging the Meridians. As soon as the words were uttered, He Miaoyin was stunned. She had actually lowered her head in front of a lowly servant. What she didn't know was that Ling Han had even channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique when he shouted, which was why he had directly stunned her mind. Seeing that He Miaoyin had really apologized, everyone found it unacceptable. Who didn't know that He Miaoyin was incomparably proud, and had the temperament of an extremely spoiled young mistress? To say nothing of insulting others, she had even beaten up junior brothers of the sect before. However, others were apprehensive of her grandfather, and thus chose to keep the peace. They didn't dare to complain to the sect at all. She even managed to suppress such a serious matter, but now, she was lowering her head just because she had called the maid a B***tch. Unbelievable. Everyone looked at He Miaoyin, and then at Ling Han. They all had a feeling that perhaps a real dragon of the sect was about to soar. However, Ling Han was very dissatisfied. He first suppressed He Miaoyin in terms of aura, and then used the brother monkey cultivation technique and combined it with a shout. Only then was He Miaoyin caught off guard and blurted out the words, "I'm sorry." Sigh, if it had been in the past, he would already have made her kneel and kowtow. He shook his head, and said to Huan Shui, "Let's go." Huan Shui's face was filled with pride. This was her master. For her, he could go against a young mistress like He Miaoyin. He was her god. She obediently walked behind Ling Han carefully. Ling Han started walking. When he walked past Rui Yuanliang and the other two, he paused for a moment, and said, "Thanks." "Thanks for what?" The others were all baffled, but Rui Yuanliang and the other two knew why. Ling Han was thanking them for personally giving him a meridian guiding pill. They really wanted to vomit blood. This matter of stealing the pill would definitely be exposed. When that happened, He Miaoyin would naturally ask them to pay compensation. Originally, as long as they had successfully framed Ling Han and Huan Shui, then naturally no one would have called them to account for this matter, but now they had to swallow this grievance in silence. Otherwise, if word got out that they had framed their junior brother from the same sect, they would be kicked out of the sect, and even their elders would not be able to save them. If it was just stealing the pill, they could still say that they were fooling around with He Miaoyin, and it wouldn't be that difficult to resolve the matter. They were all extremely depressed. They had laid such a flawless trap, so how could Ling Han easily jump out of it, and even conveniently trample all over their faces? This Ling Han. Ling Han continued walking, and when he reached Na Yang's side, he paused again. Na Yang smiled at him and winked at him. Obviously, this guy had also recognized Ling Han. After all, Ling Han didn't change his voice at that time. Yes, just as he had expected, this person was a show-off. With everyone watching, Ling Han and Huan Shui walked out of the main hall, out of the courtyard, and then headed back to their residence. After returning home, Huan Shui hurriedly handed the meridian guiding pill to Ling Han, and said, "Young master, Huan Shui almost implicated you today." Ling Han smiled, and said, "Since this was gifted to you by someone else, take it." He recalled the faces of Rui Yuanliang and the other two, and the corners of his mouth revealed a menacing expression. They actually dared to extend their claws toward him. However, the mastermind behind all this should be Li Changdan, right? Just because of the title of the Dao Child, this fellow was conspiring to get rid of Ling Han? Ling Han was now certain that the person who had ordered Zheng Tongfeng to bring him to the casino and wanted him to fall was definitely Li Changdan. However, Li Changdan was known as a prodigy, and was now at the peak stage of the 9 meridians. His battle prowess was probably much stronger than that of ordinary people. If the two of them were to engage in a fierce battle now, Ling Han would definitely lose. The higher one's cultivation level was, the greater the difference in strength. This was especially true for the 10 meridians. This was a dividing line. Why could one only become a sect elder after opening the 10 meridians? This was because a cultivator's strength would undergo a huge transformation after his cultivation had advanced to 10 meridians. The power he cultivated in his body could be unleashed from afar, and at 12 meridians, he could even injure people 100 steps away. His opponents weren't even qualified to approach him. It's all about ability. Ability. Ling Han muttered. If I let Li Changdan advance to 10 meridians first, then I will be at an absolute disadvantage. Therefore, I must catch up to his cultivation as soon as possible. The next morning, he welcomed the morning sun and cultivated as usual, and the little maidservant also joined in. He sat at the side and cultivated, while Huan Shui was practicing fist techniques. This scene was a little strange. Ling Han was clearly a tall man with long legs, but he was sitting quietly at the side, while a delicate beauty was punching and kicking, making her seem very violent. Ling Han's nostrils flared. Instantly, invisible energy was inhaled through his nose, and circulated within his body. Absorption of the energy wasn't just limited to his meridians, even a portion of his physical body would similarly absorb the energy. It was probably due to the tempering by this energy that his physical body had advanced to become even more powerful. Brother Monkey had said that this cultivation technique had great benefits. As expected, the more one cultivated it, the more one would gain new insights. Half an hour was naturally not a long time, and Ling Han used the spirit-gathering formation again. However, he discovered that as his cultivation level increased, the effect of the spirit-gathering formation on him also became weaker and weaker. It was already far inferior to half an hour ago when the sun rose, and seemed very useless. Is the level of the spirit-gathering formation too low? Ling Han deduced that the martial arts of this world had just begun, and everything originated from ancient sites buried deep underground. In that case, the formations that had appeared now were naturally very backward, and belonged to the most superficial level. No, another reason is because of the cultivation technique I'm cultivating now. Ling Han's insight was naturally sharp. He discovered that the cultivation technique he was currently cultivating was like a millstone, grinding and purifying the power in his body, removing the dregs, leaving behind essence, and increasing the level of quality. However, this would definitely cause his cultivation speed to slow down. His cultivation when the sun rose was still alright. The energy of heaven and earth was very pure to begin with. Although some impurities would be removed, there were not many of them. At most, half of them would be worn away. However, the energy produced by the spirit-gathering formation was different. There were countless impurities, and it was difficult to sieve through all of them. Therefore, the effect of the spirit-gathering formation was greatly reduced. If I were to use the 4 directional fists, such a situation would not happen. It would allow my cultivation level to continue increasing at a high speed. But what's the point of having such a high cultivation level? It's just an empty shell. It looks good, but it's useless. When you're building your foundation, you must not take shortcuts. Ling Han decided to reconstruct the meridians he had previously cultivated and purify his power. Otherwise, this would definitely affect his advancement in the future. Fortunately, I met Brother Monkey. Otherwise, if I finished cultivating the meridian opening tier with the 4 directional fists, then I don't know how much of a price I would have to pay if I wanted to reconstruct the foundation in the future. Ling Han went on to recultivate the few meridians from before. This was because he didn't need to absorb external energy, so there was no time limit on cultivation. After spending 3 days, he had completely purified the power in his body. Although his cultivation level had decreased significantly, his power hadn't. Instead, the power of his attacks had increased. It's like a sword. If it's filled with impurities, even if it's struck with great power, it will only shatter when it clashes with a stone. However, if it is forged into a sword of refined iron, even if its power is slightly weaker, it can still leave marks on the stone. Chapter 3118, 3118 Forced Decision. Chapter 3118, 3118 Forced Decision. 3118 Forced Decision. Ling Han was unable to continue his seclusion because Na Yang had arrived. "You bastard, you've kept me in the dark for so long," he rebuked. Ling Han smiled and said, "That's because you're dense." "What can I do?" Na Yang slapped his forehead. Wasn't this Han Lin, when recited backwards, Ling Han? The other party had indeed reported his real name from the beginning, but it was he himself who hadn't linked the 2 names together at all. "I don't care. You have to compensate me." He was behaving shamelessly. Ling Han smiled, tossed out a pill bottle, and said, "This is for you." This was something he had decided long ago. Na Yang reached out and took it. He smiled and said, "Don't tell me that this is a meridian guiding pill." "That's right, it's the meridian guiding pill," Ling Han said. "Hey, you're not saying that you're giving this to me as a gift, are you?" Na Yang exclaimed. Ling Han couldn't be bothered. Didn't he say from the start that it was a gift? "Fuck, I knew I was right to become friends with you, you're really something." Na Yang laughed loudly, and came over wanting to put his arm around Ling Han's shoulder. Ling Han took a step back, not allowing him to succeed. "Hee, we're all men. Why are you shy?" Na Yang teased. A show-off was a show-off, no matter where he was. Ling Han merely glanced at this fellow, and didn't pay any attention to him. "Haha, you still don't know, right?" Rui Yuanliang and the other 2 guys were extremely miserable. Na Yang changed the topic. After the investigation, it turned out that they stole that meridian guiding pill, and were severely reprimanded by their elders. Rui Yuanliang was the most miserable one. He only managed to climb up the social ladder by captivating the young lady of the Qi clan. He was never in Elder Qi's good graces to begin with. Now that such a scandal had happened, Elder Qi hung him at the door, and he was thrashed for the entire afternoon. Na Yang chuckled and gloated. Ling Han's expression was calm, and didn't express much joy over the matter. If he hadn't happened to refine the meridian guiding fruit, he would have been the one unable to clean up the mess. If it weren't for the young lady from the Qi clan pleading for mercy, Rui Yuanliang would probably still be hanging there, Na Yang said leisurely, as if he was looking forward to it. "You don't get along with these people, do you?" Ling Han asked. "Of course." Na Yang revealed a look of disdain. Those guys only depended on their elders in the family and relied on many meridian guiding fruits to achieve their current cultivation level. How much ability do they really have? And yet they act smug all day long and look down on everyone. "Pay, I really look down on them." Ling Han smiled faintly. Na Yang was indeed a little different. "However, Rui Yuanliang and the others will definitely blame this on you, so you have to be careful. Even if their cultivation levels come from accumulation, they are still 7 meridians and 8 meridians, So they still have abilities, Niyang reminded. Ling Han nodded. He was indeed not a match for a 7 meridians yet, but in a month or two at most, his strength would definitely catch up. If you really run into trouble, come find me. I'll help you resolve it. Niyang patted Ling Han's shoulder, appearing very loyal. Ling Han thought to himself that it seemed that he indeed possessed a considerable amount of affinity, but this affinity seemed to have its limitations, which was that the people who liked him would like him even more, while the people who hated him would hate him even more. That's good, though. Wouldn't the path of cultivation be too boring without one pushing the limits? The Ancient Tao Sect, Meeting Hall. At the beginning of each month, Sun Jianfang would gather all the elders in the sect for a discussion on the sect's matters. Usually, there would be no major issues, and the participants would disperse after a brief meeting. However, this time was different. Sect Master, now that the outside world is in turmoil, it's time for our sect to choose the Tao child and focus our resources on one person to compete with other forces, an elder suddenly said. He was Lao Lian's grandfather, Lao Feng. His cultivation level was said to be of 11 meridians. However, his exact level was a secret which no one knew any details about. Sun Jianfang frowned. What did Lao Feng mean? I also think that we need to settle the matter of the Tao child as soon as possible. Tan Jing seconded the motion. I think so too. He Guan nodded in agreement. Among the 7 elders, 3 of them expressed the same opinion. What about you guys? Sun Jianfang didn't say anything. He looked at the other 4 people. I agree. Qi Wu nodded. Nai Huayun, Ji Yu Tang, and Zhou Xingbang remained unperturbed, as if they weren't too interested in this matter. Sun Jianfang raised his white brows, and said, Then, elders, do you have any suitable candidates? Needless to say, it's definitely Li Changdan, He Guan immediately said. He seemed to be an impatient person. Ever since that kid started cultivating, he has always displayed outstanding talent. Moreover, he has an outstanding magnanimity. All the disciples in the sect are convinced of his abilities and character. No one will have any objections if he becomes the Tao child. Yes. Qi Wu, Lao Feng, and Tan Jing nodded. Nai Huayun wanted to say something, but hesitated. He suppressed the urge and continued to sit quietly. Of course, he wanted to push out his grandson, Niyang, but it was obvious that Qi Wu and the other 3 had formed an alliance. How could he fight alone? Therefore, it was better to let Sun Jianfang take the lead. However, this matter was a little uncertain because Zhou Xingbang, Ji Yu Tang, and Sun Jianfang didn't have any descendants. It could be said that no matter who became the Tao child, it had nothing to do with them. Therefore, it was very likely that Sun Jianfang would accede for the sake of the sect's unity. Sun Jianfang pondered for a moment, and said, Have you forgotten that the divine stone broke open and gave birth to a divine son? Since he's not of our race, he must have intentions that are different from us. Qi Wu said disdainfully. Who knows what kind of demon he is? If it was up to me, I'd directly slash him to pieces to avoid any trouble in the future. This old man was really ruthless. Sun Jianfang waved his hand. He had high expectations for Ling Han, so how could he listen to Qi Wu and kill him? In the hands of the great elites of ancient times, it was clearly mentioned that the divine stone would nurture a spiritual being of heaven and earth. The future of our ancient Tao sect should rest on Ling Han's shoulders, Sun Jianfang said. Everyone, I hope that you all can set your sights on the long term. This great era has just begun. I don't know how long the path of cultivation in the future will be. We're just one step ahead, and can be surpassed at any time. If we choose the right person, under his leadership, we might all be able to charge towards a higher mountain top. He Guan laughed and said, Sect Master, I agree with you. We must choose the right candidate for the Tao child. Therefore, I think highly of Li Changdan. We are already old, and may be trapped at 12 meridians forever, but Changdan is different. In the surging era, he should be able to overcome all kinds of obstacles and challenges, reaching a height that we can only look up to. Yes, I also have high hopes for Changdan. Qi Wu nodded. Therefore, now is the time to win over the hearts of the people. We have to firmly tie Changdan to our ancient Tao sect's battle chariot. Sun Jianfang raised his brows again. Could it be that Li Changdan would betray the ancient Tao sect in the future? Respecting one's teacher was the basic ethics that a person should have. We have to be careful when choosing the Tao child, he said slowly. Not only do they need to have standing, but they also need to possess great potential. Since that's the case, let's use the ancient formation for the audition. Chapter 3119, 3119 Audition. Chapter 3119, 3119 Audition. 3119 Audition. The ancient formation has been repaired? Nai Huayun asked. Sun Jianfang nodded, and then shook his head. A portion has been repaired, but it's far from enough to unleash its full power. Then what does Sect Master mean by an audition? Jiyu Tang asked. Actually, he was the least bothered by this matter. He didn't have any children, and what he liked the most was money and beautiful women. Therefore, as long as he could ensure that there would be no change to his lifestyle, he didn't mind who the Tao child was. Sun Jianfang said, since we're choosing the Tao child of ancient Tao sect, anyone who is of age can participate. After entering the ancient formation, whoever can walk out first will be the candidate for the Tao child. Sect Master, may I ask what this ancient formation is like? Tan Jing asked expectantly. If possible, he naturally wanted his grandson to become the Tao child. He only supported Li Changdan because he knew that his grandson couldn't compare to Li Changdan, and he himself had received benefits from Higuan. But now, he was filled with anticipation. There will be all kinds of tests in the ancient formation, said Sun Jianfang. Most importantly, if two people fight, the formation will adjust the cultivation level of both sides to ensure it will be a fair battle. It actually has such an effect. The elders were all shocked. Sun Jianfang nodded. However, I don't know whether it was the ancient formation not being completely repaired or if it was naturally like this, but it can't adjust the cultivation of both sides to be exactly the same. If it's just a difference of a single meridian, there won't be any adjustments from the formation. If the difference exceeds 1 meridian, it will suppress the one with a higher cultivation level to the point of just slightly exceeding the gap of 1 meridian. The elders all nodded. This way, they would be able to fight fairly. On the other hand, a prodigy could also stand out. For example, Li Changdan had always been invincible among his peers. Even if he encountered opponents who were stronger than him by 1 meridian, he would remain undefeated. However, the suppression of a 10 meridians on a 9 meridians was too great. Right now, Li Changdan could only be invincible among his peers. He was unable to contend against one of 10 meridians. However, if the opponent was dropped to 9 meridians, then Li Changdan would still be the same Li Changdan from before. In this ancient formation, his battle prowess would definitely be number 1. Higuan immediately nodded, and said, all right, Sect Master's suggestion is really good. Anyone can participate in the audition. The one who stands out is undoubtedly the Tao child. No one can say anything further. Yes. Qi Feng and the others nodded. This was indeed relatively fair, but with Li Changdan's strength, who else could compete with him? To be honest, even if they entered the ancient formation, they might not be a match for Li Changdan. Then it's decided, Sun Jianfang said indifferently. The time is set to be 10 days later. A piece of news spread, shocking the entire ancient Tao sect. Audition for selecting the Tao child. The Tao child was actually not decided by the sect master or elders, but was to be selected through an audition. How would he be selected? Everyone went to understand the situation, and then shook their head. Under such rules, who could compete with Li Changdan? Of course, there was also a portion of people looking forward to it. This was because the ancient formation wasn't as simple as just a battle. It also depended on luck. Perhaps if one had a burst of luck, they would be the first to run out of the formation without even having to fight. Everyone was making preparations. There were still 10 days left, so they naturally had to make proper preparations. When Ling Han heard of this, he was also slightly surprised. This was because Sun Jianfang had previously said that he would be given 3 years to advance to 12 meridians. At that time, he would be appointed as the Tao child. Why did things suddenly change? However, within the formation, his cultivation level would be suppressed. If there was only a difference of 1 meridian, Ling Han believed that he would still be able to defeat all his opponents. However, the question was, why was selection of the Dao child being moved ahead of schedule? Someone was causing trouble. At first, Ling Han didn't manage to guess the reason behind this, but within 2 days, there was news that Li Changdan and He Miaoyin were getting engaged, and the time was on the day after the audition for Dao child. So that was the case. He Guan took the initiative, and gave the other elders some benefits so that they could form an alliance to force Sun Jianfang's hand. Then, Sun Jianfang would have no choice but to accede. Well, it was Li Changdan again. Ling Han rubbed his chin. Actually, he didn't really care about the status of the Dao child. He believed in himself. This wasn't something that could be decided by whether he was given the identity of the Dao child or not. However, Li Changdan's tricks made Ling Han extremely displeased. So he wanted to bully him? Since Li Changdan cared so much about the status of the Dao child, Ling Han had to take it all the more. Li Changdan? Alright, let's meet this ancient Dao sect's #1 prodigy. Ling Han used these 10 days to either cultivate or practice the demonic monkey fists every day. This set of fist techniques was truly vast and profound, as if it was enough for him to use the rest of his life to figure it out. 10 days later, all the youngsters of the ancient Dao sect arrived in front of the Great Formation. At the foot of the mountain, there were paddy fields, forests, and a stretch of river. Who do you guys think will obtain the position of Dao child? TSK, is there a need to guess? It must be senior brother Li. That's right. Not only is senior brother Li of 9 meridians, he's also invincible among his peers. No matter what, I think it's impossible for him to meet his match. That's not necessarily true. Nai Yang and Tu Luo aren't weak, either. It's not certain who will win in a battle of the same level. What a joke. Senior brother Li is invincible in a battle of the same level, okay? Besides, Nai Yang and Tu Luo haven't even entered the 9 meridians. How can they be a match for senior brother Li when there's a difference of 1 meridian? Exactly. The public opinion was basically leaning towards Li Changdan. After all, he had been a top prodigy of the ancient Dao sect ever since he started cultivating. Now that he had the advantage in cultivation level, he definitely had a high chance of winning. Li Changdan is here, someone shouted. In the distance, Li Changdan strode over, accompanied by a delicate beauty. It was He Miaoyin, who had just celebrated her 18th birthday. Li Changdan was dressed in a green martial arts attire, completely revealing his slender and muscular figure. Coupled with his gentle and refined appearance, he was truly elegant and graceful, causing many female disciples to squeal involuntarily. He Miaoyin's face was filled with pride. This incomparably outstanding man would soon become her fiancé, as well as the ancient Dao sect's Dao child and future sect master. These women, Humph, you're only worthy of being jealous of me. A faint smile was seen on Li Changdan's face. No one could guess what he was thinking. Looks like the rumors are true. Senior brother Li is really going to get engaged to junior sister He. Sigh, I'm so envious of senior brother Li junior sister He is so beautiful, and she's also elder his granddaughter. Nonsense, it's clearly He Miaoyin who's out of his league. Senior brother Li is so handsome, so elegant, and so promising. The men were jealous of Li Changdan, while the women were envious of He Miaoyin. Some of them even started fighting. Few people noticed that Ling Han had also walked over from another direction. He glanced at Li Changdan, and a knowing smile appeared on his face. Actually, he understood Li Changdan better than anyone else. Such a person, who called himself a prodigy, actually thought that He Miaoyin was not worthy of him. However, for his future, he had to make some sacrifices. Otherwise, how could he have such an expression when his beloved was right beside him? Chapter 3120 Searching for Formation Foundations. Chapter 3120 Searching for Formation Foundations. Searching for Formation Foundations. Ling Han wasn't interested in expressing his opinion. Firstly, he and He Miaoyin weren't friends, and secondly, even if he did, He Miaoyin probably wouldn't appreciate his kindness. Instead, she would think that he was deliberately trying to sow discord. It had nothing to do with him. Ling Han stood at the side, waiting for the great formation to be activated. Nai Yang, Lao Lian, and the others were also here. They had to try their best and not allow themselves to have any regrets. After a while, Sun Jianfang, He Guan, Lao Feng, and the other elites walked over together. In this era, every cultivator was an extremely precious resource. However, only those whose cultivation had reached 10 meridians were qualified to truly become a powerful elite. Those with 9 meridians and above could be called king tiers. Sun Jianfang and the others were publicly acknowledged king tiers. Although they were all very old, it was as if there were dozens or even hundreds of ferocious tigers hidden within their bodies. Once they unleashed their might, it would shake the heavens and earth. Everyone knows the rules, Sun Jianfang said simply. The first person to walk out of the Great Formation will be our sect's Tao child. In addition, you can attack as you wish in the Great Formation, and need not worry about the consequences. This is because this ancient formation is used as a test. If a fatal situation occurs, the person will be automatically sent out. However, this also means that he will have lost the qualifications to fight for the Tao child position. Alright, go in. He waved his hand. Instantly, those who were determined to fight for the position of Tao child entered the Great Formation. The ancient formation hadn't been activated yet, but after Sun Jianfang placed a jade pendant in it, this Great Formation was finally activated. The originally clearly visible ground and forest gradually became blurry, as if it was covered in a thick layer of fog. Those who entered the Great Formation hurriedly broke into a run. The best strategy was none other than to rush out of the Great Formation as quickly as possible without engaging in any battle. However, as soon as they ran, they realized that something was amiss. This was because the surroundings that they had clearly seen earlier had become incomparably blurry. Their visibility was only about 3 meters, and they immediately lost their sense of direction. They couldn't tell which direction was north, south, east, or west. "Wait for me," Li Changdan said softly to He Miaoyin. His voice was gentle and intoxicating. He Miaoyin nodded, and said, "I'll wait for you at the exit. The first person to walk out will definitely be you." Li Changdan smiled proudly and strode toward the ancient formation. On the other side, Ling Han also told his little handmaiden to go back first, while he himself leisurely walked towards the Great Formation. This Great Formation was like a monster that had devoured many people. Mist billowed, as if it had emerged independently from this mountainous region. Ling Han strolled along as he observed his surroundings. Since this was a formation, there was no way one would be the first to leave just by relying on their speed. Therefore, the most important thing at the moment was not to run out, but to observe. If he could see through what formation this was, he would be able to break through it directly. If he couldn't, he would have to see through at least its fundamentals. Otherwise, it would only be a waste of time and energy. Ling Han seemed to be walking casually, but he was actually taking in his surroundings. He made comparisons of his observations, and reconstructed them in his mind as he went along. He had never seen this formation before, but he had also studied formations in the Genesis world, so there were bound to be similarities. Furthermore, he was now boosted by various attributes, with affinity, natural talent in alchemy, and, of course, formations. He captured the slightest change, and all kinds of enlightenment arose in his heart. If I take 3 steps here, Ling Han took 3 steps to the left, and the path ahead suddenly opened up. The fog seemed to have instantly disappeared, and returned to its original appearance. Not bad. Ling Han walked towards the exit, but he had only taken a dozen steps when the fog appeared once again. He hadn't been able to break through this formation, he had only managed to understand a tiny bit of its secret. If I could master this formation and set it up around my residence, would I still need to worry about being ambushed? Also, such an arrangement would greatly increase the safety factor when exploring the wilderness. The reason why this formation could be set up successfully is definitely because of the formation foundations buried in every corner. I'll go dig out the formation foundations and learn the formation patterns. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He believed that this formation could trap everyone for a long period of time, including Li Changdan, because Ling Han was the only formation alchemist in the entire ancient Dao sect. Li Changdan definitely had not studied formations before. At the very least, he did not have much natural talent in this area. If the other party wanted to walk out, he would have to repeatedly measure every inch of land. He would also have to have an outstanding memory in order to draw a map in his mind. Ling Han was not in a hurry. He relied on his intuition regarding formations, and combined it with what he had currently grasped to locate the location of the formation foundations. After coming out of the divine stone, his strength had to start from scratch, but he didn't completely start from scratch. This was because he had unimaginable luck, as he possessed astonishing comprehension of formations and alchemy. After searching for a while, Ling Han finally stopped. He began to dig in the ground. This was a competition within the same sect, so no one was allowed to carry a weapon. Ling Han could only snap off a nearby branch, and then use the branch as a shovel. He dug 3 feet into the ground, but he still didn't find what he needed. Could it be that it's not here? Ling Han rubbed his chin. Or could it be that I didn't dig deep enough? I'll dig some more. He continued to dig. The 3 feet deep burrow became 5 feet, but he still couldn't find the formation foundations. I'll dig another 3 feet. Ling Han gave himself a limit. After digging continuously and shoveling out a large amount of soil, the corners of Ling Han's mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. He finally dug it out. Underneath the ground, there was a black pillar erected. It looked like some kind of metal, and there was a strange light flickering on its surface. Ling Han reached out and pulled it out. Fortunately, there wasn't much of the black pillar that was still buried in the ground, so he easily pulled it out. However, as soon as it was pulled out, the flickering brilliance on it immediately dimmed, as if it had turned into an ordinary iron pillar. It was about 1 foot long, thicker than a forearm, and square-shaped. Each side was engraved with complicated veined patterns, giving one a headache just by looking at it. Ling Han keenly discovered that after digging out this pillar, the fog suddenly disappeared in the radius of about 90 meters. Once the formation foundations were gone, the formation in this area would naturally lose its effectiveness. Ling Han observed the veined patterns on the formation foundations. These were formation patterns, the core secrets of a formation. However, no matter how much he looked, he could not grasp anything. This was because as long as he looked away, his mind would not have the image of the formation patterns at all. If he couldn't remember them at all, how could he learn? Ancient formations are indeed not easy to learn. Ling Han nodded. What should he do? Could it be that he was going to give up just like that? Ling Han looked to his left and right, and after confirming that there was indeed no one around, he hid this black pillar into the layers of his clothing. Yes, I'll take it back and slowly study it. Ling Han, I've finally found you. A voice suddenly sounded from behind Ling Han. Chapter 31:21, 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. Chapter 31:21, 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. Ling Han turned around to look. It was an unfamiliar man who appeared to be in his 30s. Do I know you? Ling Han asked. Humph, I asked you to sell 2 meridian guiding pills back then, but you refused. I told you before, you'd better not let me see you within the sect, the man said through clenched teeth. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. So it was him. The first time he went to sell pills, he did meet someone who insisted that he sell 2 meridian guiding pills, and even said some harsh words. However, at that time, both parties had covered their faces, and did not know each other's identities. With Ling Han being outstanding and having made a name for himself at He Miao Yin's birthday banquet, some people would definitely be able to figure out something. Oh, what do you want now? Ling Han asked calmly. Of course I'm going to beat you up. The man charged forward, throwing a punch at Ling Han. I'm going to personally send you out of the formation and make you lose your chance to become the Dao child. You'll regret it for the rest of your life. They couldn't kill anyone here, as the Great Formation would send them out at the last moment. Ling Han's feet didn't move. Only when the attack of this punch approached him did he similarly clench a fist and blast it towards his opponent. Peng! That person's body shook, and he couldn't help but stagger backward. After retreating 7 or 8 steps, he finally managed to steady his footing. What? His face was filled with disbelief. He was a 7 meridians, and his power reached 7,000 kilograms. Even if his cultivation level was suppressed, he was definitely stronger than Ling Han by 1 meridian. But now, the feeling was reversed. It was as if Ling Han was the one who was superior to him by 1 meridian. Was Ling Han of 8 meridians? How was he supposed to believe this? If this brat who had just entered the sect for less than 2 months could leap to 8 meridians, then what justice was there left in the world? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "You want to send me out of the Great Formation, but your abilities seem to be a little lacking." The man was so angry that he was trembling. After letting out a loud roar, he immediately charged over again and unleashed his 4 directional fists. Ling Han shook his head. "You're filled with flaws." Over the past few days, he had been studying the demonic monkey fists. Coupled with his insight as a former heavenly venerate, the mastery of his fist techniques had actually already reached an astonishing height. In terms of fist techniques alone, even if Sun Jianfang unleashed the true 4 directional fists, he might not necessarily be a match for Ling Han. Ling Han only needed to move his feet slightly, and easily dodged the punch. The man's punch missed, but he swiftly pivoted sideways, leveraging on this force to deliver another heavy punch. Ling Han shook his head repeatedly, shifting his feet as he did so. He looked extremely casual, but no matter how fast the man swung his fists, they did not even touch the corner of Ling Han's clothes. After dozens of punches, that person couldn't help but feel shocked. He stared at Ling Han, and suddenly came to a realization. "You've mastered a movement technique." As soon as this thought crossed his mind, he couldn't help but reveal a greedy expression. Now that the path of martial arts had just begun, there would be ancient techniques appearing from time to time, but the movement techniques were pitifully few in number. Did Lord Sect Master pass this down to Ling Han in private? Why? Just because this guy was some *T divine son? Ah, he roared explosively, and attacked Ling Han like a mad tiger. Ling Han threw out a punch, but didn't meet the opponent's attack head-on. Instead, his fist directly blasted through the flaw in that person's fist technique, and smashed into that person's cheek. He didn't use too much force, and it was completely insufficient to kill him. Thus, that person only flew into the air, and wasn't sent out of the Great Formation. Ayo! That person fell hard, and couldn't help but groan as he lay on the ground. Ling Han walked over, his slender figure casting a shadow over the man's face. "So what if I don't sell you alchemical pills? Do you still have any objections?" Ling Han lifted the man up, and slapped him over a dozen times in succession. However, he quickly lost interest. In the Genesis world, those who were his enemies were all supreme prodigies Ji Wuming, Feng Wuding, and Xin Qihu. Only trampling such prodigies would bring pleasure to him. He was done playing. Ling Han raised his fist, wanting to send the other party out of the Great Formation. However, after thinking for a moment, his fist did not land. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face. The man couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. Looking at this smile made him feel a terrifying fear in his heart. He couldn't help but ask, "What are you trying to do?" "Hee hee." Ling Han chuckled, and began to peel off the man's clothes. No. 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 The man was terrified. What was going on? Could it be that Ling Han had some special fetish? "What are you screaming for? It's not like you're going to lose a piece of flesh." Ling Han snickered a few times, and stripped the man of all his clothes. The man only felt cool wind blowing against his buttocks as he thought of the kind of forbidden love that had once prevailed 100 years ago. He couldn't help but shiver in fear. Could it be that Ling Han had vile intentions about his ***? No, he covered his butt with both hands, as if he would rather die than submit. Peng! Ling Han's fist smashed down, smashing towards the man's head. This was a fatal blow, but it was precisely because of this that the Great Formation was activated. Xiao, the man disappeared into thin air. Interesting, Ling Han murmured. Although one of the formation foundations is missing, breaking through the surrounding fog, the functions of the formation have not completely disappeared. Otherwise, in this area, I would be able to kill someone. If I was the designer, I'd use 2 sets of formations overlapping to achieve it. One is the fog formation, and the other is the defensive formation. However, why does this person's sudden disappearance seem like the regulations of space from the Genesis world? Interesting. Formations are really worth studying. I believe that they complement martial arts. Outside the formation, Shua, a white figure flashed and appeared in the plaza. Another person has been eliminated. Phut, what's going on? Everyone was collectively horrified. This naked man was covering his butt while wailing loudly, and he seemed as if he had nothing to live for. What sort of blow has he suffered? This is Yang Fei. He seems to be a 7 Meridians elite. His abilities are definitely not weak. How did he get eliminated so quickly? Phut, forgive me for being easily amused, but I really can't help it. Why is he stark naked? Even if he was sneak attacked when he was pooping, it shouldn't be like this, right? Everyone was talking animatedly, but they really couldn't guess the situation at that time. After screaming for a while, Yang Fei also sensed that something was wrong. He stopped screaming and looked around. He immediately became so angry that he almost fainted. He was actually stark naked in front of everyone. Look, some people were even pointing at his buttocks, while some female disciples turned their heads away in embarrassment. They wanted to look, but they didn't dare to. It was over. He was really going to become famous in the ancient Tao sect, and such a reputation was enough to make him forget about raising his head in the sect for the next 10 years. He thought about how he would inevitably be pointed at when walking about in the sect in the future. A senior brother would introduce him to his junior brothers and junior sisters who had just entered the sect. This is Yang Fei, the one who revealed his bare buttocks during the audition for the Tao Child position back then. Ling Han. Yang Fei gritted his teeth, his eyes spitting fire with hatred. He naturally knew now that Ling Han didn't have any special fetishes, and was just trying to make him suffer a great humiliation. Bastard, I'm going to kill you. Chapter 3122, 3122 being humiliated instead. Chapter 3122, 3122 being humiliated instead. 3122 being humiliated instead. Ling Han naturally did not take it to heart. He had obtained a formation foundation, and was in a very good mood. As he whistled, he continued to search for other formation foundations. After dozens of steps, he entered the fog-shrouded area again. Ling Han slowed down. He studied it carefully. This fog had a strange power. He was clearly walking in a straight line, but as he walked, he actually circled back to the original spot. It wasn't that there was an overlap in space, but that his divine sense had unknowingly been affected. If my divine sense is incomparably tenacious, this formation will definitely not be able to interfere with me. At most, it'll just be a fog covering my eyes, Ling Han concluded. Interesting, interesting. As he made a careful assessment, he soon found another spot to start digging. He had experience this time, so he was naturally determined. After digging for about 7 feet, he found the second formation foundations. After taking it away, the fog within a radius of 90 meters instantly dispersed. Ding, ding, ding. He knocked on the 2 formation foundations, producing a crisp sound. This is metal from the ancient era. It doesn't exist in the modern world. But why do I have a feeling that this is even sturdier than earth element iron? Unfortunately, he didn't have a sword with him. Otherwise, he could have used it to slash the item and see which one was sturdier. Just as he was about to leave, he saw someone rushing toward him. Rui Yuanliang. Enemies were really bound to meet on a narrow road. Rui Yuanliang had already neared him, and said balefully, "Enemies are really bound to meet on a narrow road." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Do you know that stealing someone's lines is a very bad behavior?" Rui Yuanliang humphed. "You don't know how to repent even on the brink of death. How pathetic." Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, I heard that you were hung and beaten up. I wonder if your injuries have healed. Rui Yuanliang almost went mad with anger. Wasn't this rubbing his nose in it? Besides, this was all Ling Han's fault. His chest heaved up and down a few times before he forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, "Go ahead and talk. When I trample you under my feet, you'll regret angering me." Ling Han spread his hands, and said, "It seems like you and those people surnamed Tan were the ones who framed me, and you ended up humiliating yourself instead, right? Why are you blaming me now? You still dare to say it?" Rui Yuanliang roared as he charged over. This really made him feel sullen. He had given Ling Han a meridian guiding pill for nothing, while he himself had been hung at the gate and gotten whipped. He had completely lost face. He wanted to kill someone. Boom! A fist flew over, bringing with it a terrifying gale. However, Rui Yuanliang revealed a shocked expression. He naturally understood the approximate level of his strength when he attacked. 3,500 kilograms. This was the power of one whose cultivation level had reached the peak of 5 meridians. It was very normal. Ling Han's cultivation was definitely weaker than his, so the Great Formation would lower his cultivation. However, because the disparity was too great, he was still 1 meridian higher than Ling Han. What did that mean? Ling Han's cultivation level should be at 4 meridians. A fellow who had been in the sect for less than 2 months had actually cultivated to 4 meridians. However, with so many meridian guiding pills in Ling Han's possession, in addition to the spirit gathering formation, it was not entirely impossible for him to reach 4 meridians in 2 months. Rui Yuanliang was mad with jealousy. He had only eaten 3 meridian guiding fruits. Compared to Ling Han, how wide was this gap? Biased. Sun Jianfang was really too biased. In that case, Rui Yuanliang would ruthlessly humiliate this fellow and make him lose all face. He would find an opportunity to kill him in the future. In just an instant, so many thoughts crossed Rui Yuanliang's mind. Ling Han smiled faintly. The people of the ancient Dao sect basically cultivated the 4 directional fists, and it was a simplified version at that. In front of him, it was simply full of flaws. Even if he didn't cultivate the demonic monkey fists, with his insight as an ultimate elite, he could easily pick out more than 10 of such flaws. What he had lost was just power. Ling Han kicked out. Peng! His kick arrived first, and landed on Rui Yuanliang's chest. Under the powerful impact, Rui Yuanliang was instantly kicked many meters up high before he fell hard on the ground. Rui Yuanliang groaned and laid on the ground, unable to recover. This kick was really too hurtful. He was about to get up, but just as he raised his head, he felt a foot step on his cheek and press him further to the ground. It was naturally Ling Han's. He was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was clearly the one who had suddenly discovered Ling Han and wanted to come over to take revenge, so how could he be thrashed by Ling Han instead? This didn't make sense. How could the other party have seen through the flaw in his punch? Furthermore, his power was so great. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have felt so terrible from just taking a kick. Did it feel good? Ling Han asked with a smile. Rui Yuanliang only wanted to kill, but he was being stepped on by Ling Han. What else could he do other than glare at him? He was extremely humiliated. Although he was a live-in son-in-law and was often laughed at behind his back, who wouldn't respectfully call him young Master Rui in front of him? How humiliating. Hee. Ling Han chuckled, and began to peel off Rui Yuanliang's clothes too. What are you trying to do? Rui Yuanliang asked in shock. It was indeed painful previously, and it made him feel ashamed. However, compared to taking off his pants, it had become a small matter. Asterisk. Ling Han said viciously. Rui Yuanliang almost fainted from fright. How could he have thought that Ling Han actually had such a fetish? This great formation prohibited killing, but there didn't seem to be anything forbidden about being, right? He was scared to death. If he was really, would the Qi clan still acknowledge him as their son-in-law? He was finally afraid, and screamed repeatedly, "No!" Ling Han snickered. He paid no attention to it, and continued to strip him. Although Rui Yuanliang resisted desperately, How was he capable of resisting? Soon, he was stripped naked. No. Rui Yuanliang screamed miserably like Yang Fei. This was the effect that Ling Han wanted. Peng. He threw a punch at Rui Yuanliang's head. At this moment, the Great Formation immediately took effect, and sent Rui Yuanliang out. Thus, the people outside the formation were fortunate enough to see another naked man. That's Rui Yuanliang. Look at how miserable he looks. Could it be that he was too? Heavens, could it be that there's a pervert in the sect? Everyone only felt a sense of panic, and there are asterisk says faintly hurt at the thought. It's over. Rui Yuanliang has embarrassed himself in public like this. I reckon that the Qi clan will never want this son-in-law again. That's for sure. That young lady from the Qi clan is famous for being, flirtatious. She could simply go with another man. How could she accept a husband who had bared his buttocks in public? Senior brother Rui is really spectacular in some aspects. No wonder he charmed Miss Qi. Rui Yuanliang heard all of this, and his hands couldn't help but clench tightly. Although Ling Han didn't kill him, and didn't even severely injure him, he knew that all that he possessed had already been destroyed by Ling Han. He swore in his heart that no matter what price he had to pay, he would kill Ling Han. Then, he finally shed tears of humiliation. Chapter 31-23, 31-23 Battling Li Changdan. Chapter 31-23, 31-23 Battling Li Changdan. 31-23 Battling Li Changdan. Ling Han walked into the fog, and continued to search for the formation foundations. Since he had already found two, finding the third one was naturally not a problem. Very quickly, Ling Han located it. He dug 7 feet into the ground, and obtained the third formation foundations. I can't dig anymore. Ling Han sighed. It wasn't that he didn't have enough time, but that the 3 formation foundations were already very obvious. They had stretched his clothes so much that the latter were nearly bursting at the seams, and thus it was impossible for him to hold a 4th one. I'll have to come back and dig for them later. Ling Han was still thinking about it. This formation ought to be very high level, being capable of forcibly bringing down the cultivation level of Meridian Opening Tier to almost the same level. It would also be very practical in battle. If I can simplify it and set it up at any time, whom would I be afraid of in a battle of the same level? He began to look for an exit. He didn't want Li Changdan to be lucky and walk out first. Here, turn 3 steps to the left. Here, take 2 steps back. The fog continued to dissipate in front of him. Standing at a special node, he could clearly see the entire picture. Hey! Ling Han was astounded. He really couldn't underestimate Li Changdan. This guy had actually walked more than half of the way. If nothing had changed, he should be able to walk out of the formation in another 2 hours. I'll fight you. Ling Han increased his speed. This wouldn't allow him to walk in a straight line, and the formation would unknowingly affect his divine sense. Unless his divine sense was extremely powerful, he wouldn't be able to ignore the effects of the formations. Right now, he could only follow the rules of the formations obediently. The distance between the two was rapidly closing, but it was only after half an hour that Ling Han managed to reduce the distance to under 90 meters. Due to the fog, Li Changdan did not notice Ling Han's approach. He was still focused on exploring the path ahead. As he was close enough, Ling Han discovered that there was something faintly glowing under Li Changdan's neck. With a flash, the fog would be pushed back a little, and then he took the opportunity to take a few steps forward. Although the speed wasn't fast, it was stable, and there was no need to take the wrong path. This guy has a treasure that can unravel formations, Ling Han said. However, this one should only be able to reduce the power of the formations by a little. Otherwise, he completely could have taken large strides and directly walked out. No wonder this guy can take the lead. Ling Han walked forward, but as soon as he left that special node, Li Changdan's figure immediately disappeared. It didn't matter. After he took a few steps, Li Changdan immediately appeared before his eyes again. At 60 meters, 30 meters, and 15 meters, the distance between the two of them was already getting very close. Li Changdan suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt that something was slightly amiss. He stopped moving, and it looked like he was listening around. Was anyone approaching? Impossible. He had a rare treasure that he had obtained from exploring an ancient site. How could he believe that someone could catch up to him now? Could it be a sniper that the formation had manifested? This wasn't impossible. He had explored ancient sites before, and knew that some formations could materialize energy and transform it into a humanoid or ferocious beast form to kill those who entered. He didn't dare to be careless, and immediately put up his guard. The fog billowed. A long time later, a black shadow emerged from the fog and approached him continuously. However, due to the fog, he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly. The object of energy was fast approaching. Li Changdan had already channeled his power, ready to unleash an attack of 9 meridians at any moment. The fog rose again, and the figure of the person finally became clear. Disbelief instantly appeared on Li Changdan's face, and he blurted out, "Ling Han." Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Senior brother Li seems to be very surprised." Li Changdan was extremely shrewd, and the shock on his face slowly disappeared. He took a deep breath, and said, as expected of someone birthed from the divine stone, born with special ability. He had relied on a rare treasure to reach this place, but Ling Han was actually able to catch up to him. Was there any other reason besides obtaining some sort of ability from the divine stone? Born with special ability? Ling Han thought for a moment. This could also be counted as so. He possessed the secret code of the entire Genesis world, which equipped him with extremely strong luck and affinity, as well as special comprehension abilities in alchemy and formations. Senior brother Li, shouldn't we settle the score between us? Li Changdan remained calm and even looked surprised. Junior brother, what are you talking about? It's just the two of us, and you still want to pretend? Ling Han said with a smile. Wasn't this guy a little too careful? Oh. He nodded. Senior brother is worried that I have a recording device on me. If I accidentally record your voice, it will expose your true colors and destroy your perfect image, right? Li Changdan shook his head with a pained expression. Junior brother, you're really thinking too much. Fine. I can't be bothered to expose your hypocrisy. Relatively speaking, I'd rather give you a good beating to vent my anger, Ling Han said. Junior brother, you seem to have a lot of misunderstandings about me. Li Changdan sighed. Come and fight. Ling Han was too lazy to waste his breath. He had always used violence to make others submit. Xiao, he shot forward like an arrow, and the fog surged. He was like a fairy from the heavens. Li Changdan was naturally unafraid of the challenge. The corners of his lips curled in a cold smile. Didn't Ling Han know that he, Li Changdan, was an outstanding talent among the younger generation of the ancient Tao sect? In a battle of the same levels, he was the true invincible one. He casually struck out with his palm. It appeared to be a light strike, but it actually carried supreme power. This was the 4-splitting snowflake palm, which he had obtained from an ancient site. Its power was slightly inferior to that of the real 4-directional fists, but because he had only learned one style of the 4-directional fists, it was definitely not as useful as this palm technique. With this palm strike, he was going to make Ling Han suffer. Ling Han did not retreat, and directly took the attack head-on. Peng! The two of them clashed, and a force as high as 5,000 kilograms surged, causing the surrounding fog to rapidly swirl. Teng! Ling Han took 9 consecutive steps back, and Li Changdan also took 3 consecutive steps back. Both sides took a total of 12 steps back, and both of them instantly disappeared into the fog, making it difficult to see each other's figures. Ling Han gave a shake of his hand. Li Changdan really lived up to his reputation. Despite his cultivation level being suppressed to 5 meridians, he actually still had the power to suppress Ling Han. He couldn't be underestimated. However, Ling Han's fighting spirit flared instead. To constantly trample on trash like Yang Fei and Rui Yuanliang really did not give him a sense of accomplishment. Junior brother, you're really amazing, Li Changdan said with a smile, but his heart was filled with shock. Others might not know, but he knew very well that because of the rare treasure hanging around his neck, he could slightly loosen the formation's suppression on him. Thus, he could move forward slowly but firmly. On the other hand, the suppression of his cultivation level was weaker than for others. Others could only be higher by 1 meridian, but he was close to 2. He was a prodigy to begin with, and his battle prowess was invincible among those of the same cultivation level. Further, there was the suppression caused by the disparity in power to about 2 meridians, so who could be his match? Chapter 31-24, 31-24 Treasure Seizing. Chapter 31-24, 31-24 Treasure Seizing. 31-24 Treasure Seizing. Li Changdan had originally thought that he was invincible among the younger generation, but after exchanging a blow with Ling Han, tempestuous waves surged in his heart. In terms of power, Ling Han was only slightly inferior to him, but the power of Ling Han's fist was incomparably condensed. This punch caused his palm to hurt and even feel slightly numb. How was this possible? With the suppression by nearly 2 meridians of cultivation, coupled with the fact that he was already stronger than most people, his current strength was around 6,000 kgf from the suppression of his cultivation level. It could be seen that Ling Han's cultivation level should be at 4 meridians. The power of the 4 meridians was only about 1,750 kilograms, yet Ling Han's strength was as high as 5,000 kilograms. How terrifying was this? Hiss. Li Changdan felt numb with shock, while at the same time, boundless killing intent surged within him. Such a person had to be eliminated. Otherwise, Li Changdan wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Junior brother Ling, let me teach you how to fight. He charged over and struck out with his palm. It appeared to be a light strike, but actually carried a strong sound of rushing wind, indicating that the destructive power of this palm strike was actually very terrifying. He had a rare treasure that could negate the suppression of the formations within a short range. Thus, he broke through the fog and charged murderously towards Ling Han. It was only a mere 12 steps. A raging fighting spirit appeared on Ling Han's face as he charged forward. Xiao, his figure was agile like a highly spirited monkey. This was indeed the demonic monkey fists. Li Changdan's palm landed on thin air. Ling Han's fist smashed over from an extremely tricky angle, completely exceeding his expectations. This was not the 4-directional fists. Peng. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he was punched in the left shoulder. A piercing pain assaulted him, causing him to grunt and stagger back. This was only because he had dodged in time. Otherwise, this punch would have landed on his chest. What a terrifying fist technique. Why was it even more powerful than the style of 4-directional fists that he had learned? What fist technique is this? He couldn't hide his shock. Dog fist. Ling Han laughed, and once again closed in, throwing a punch. This demonic monkey fists was not only agile, but also extremely domineering. Ling Han seemed to have transformed into a domineering, rash demonic monkey, exuding boundless savageness. His punches were tricky and domineering, causing Li Changdan to be hit repeatedly. He was in extreme pain. Li Changdan had cultivated up to 9 meridians, so his physique was naturally very powerful. However, after being struck by Ling Han's barrage of attacks, he was still in extreme pain. After all, the force of over 5,000 kilograms had smashed into him, causing him to be in extreme pain. He was no longer as calm as before, and his neat hair had become disheveled. He no longer had the slightest trace of elegance. This top genius of the ancient Tao sect was actually so weak. It wasn't that Li Changdan was too weak, but that Ling Han was too freakish. In this era, who had obtained an inheritance of cultivation technique? Perhaps there was some, but it was definitely pitifully little. At the very least, Li Changdan didn't have it. Meanwhile, with the tempering from the brother monkey cultivation technique, Ling Han's power was incomparably pure. He also possessed 5,000 kilograms of power, but his destructive power was greater than others. Coupled with the demonic monkey fists, which might be a secret technique from the golden age of ancient martial arts, it naturally far surpassed the 4-directional fists and the 4-splitting snowflake palm. Furthermore, Ling Han's state of mind as an ultimate elite was something that Li Changdan could never compare to. With so many factors added together, Even if Li Changdan had the cultivation level advantage by 2 meridians, it would be useless. He could only passively take a beating. However, compared to Rui Yuanliang, he was much more durable. At the very least, he could still hold on for now, unlike Rui Yuanliang, who had been defeated with just a kick from Ling Han. Li Changdan was no match for Ling Han, and had the intention to retreat. If he continued to fight, he would only be humiliating himself. As long as he left this great formation, he would have a crushing advantage in terms of power, and would definitely be able to find an opportunity to eliminate Ling Han. He had to get rid of him. This guy was too freakish. He pretended to make a move before he turned to run. Peng, he unleashed his power, and kicked out at an extremely fast speed. Right now, none of them had mastered any movement techniques, so speed was basically dependent on power. With this burst of power, he instantly disappeared into the fog. However, Ling Han was not nervous at all, nor did he chase after them. Instead, he clasped his hands behind his back and counted, 1, 2, 3. He had only counted to 9 when he saw a black shadow coming toward him. Li Changdan, you're back. Ling Han laughed loudly, and his right fist had already struck out. This was a psychedelic great formation. Although Li Changdan possessed a rare treasure that could break through the formation with certain limitations, that rare treasure wouldn't be able to take effect in time when he was running so quickly just now. Thus, even though he was clearly walking forward, he had actually made a detour and ran right in front of Ling Han. What? Li Changdan's pupils involuntarily dilated, but he was a prodigy after all. He abruptly bent over and barely dodged the punch. Peng, Ling Han kicked out, hitting right between Li Changdan's legs. Oh! Li Changdan had already cultivated his physical body to an extremely powerful state, yet no matter how much he cultivated, he couldn't cultivate that place as well. His entire body bowed, and his face turned so pale that there was no trace of blood circulation. He swayed back and forth on his tiptoes, as if a mere light push would cause him to tip over and fall to the ground. Ling Han shook his head. If Li Changdan was placed in the Genesis world, he would be far from a prodigy. He could only be said to be slightly stronger than ordinary people. This world had just started, after all, and there was a limited number of cultivators. Moreover, in such a small place like the ancient Tao sect, it was normal that no true prodigy had appeared. Ling Han instantly felt a sense of boredom. He had originally thought that he could trample on a prodigy, but who would have thought that this one would only be slightly better than mediocrity, disappointing him. Boring. He shook his head. Li Changdan really wanted to curse. You beat him up so badly, and yet you still said that it was boring? He was the #1 genius of the ancient Tao sect. Having defeated him, how glorious would that be? What a huge humiliation. However, Li Changdan couldn't even open his mouth. Now, he deeply understood what it meant to have a pain in the nuts, and this was really fatal. Ling Han stretched out his hand, and tore open Li Changdan's collar with a rip. A purple pendant hung from his chest, and he wore it with a thread. Ling Han reached out and pulled at it. The thread broke, and the pendant fell into his hand. "Our return," Li Changdan barely said, but the words "it to me" couldn't be uttered at all. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Senior brother is really stingy. Isn't it just a pendant carved from a piece of broken wood? What's our relationship for you to be fussing over this with me?" He put his arm around Li Changdan's shoulder, as if they were good friends. Li Changdan reached out with a trembling hand, but the pain coming from his lower body was too intense. He felt as if just stretching out his hand had caused a tug on his balls, and it was so painful that he was about to cry. How was this a pendant carved out of broken wood? It was a rare treasure he had obtained from an ancient site that could suppress formations. Now that ancient sites were appearing one after another in this world, all of them were protected by formations. Thus, how practical was this pendant? It was extremely precious. Chapter 3125, 3125 Tao Child. Chapter 3125, 3125 Tao Child. 3125 Tao Child. "Thank you, Senior Brother Li," Ling Han said, as he waved the pendant in his hand before striding off. Our return, Li Changdan tried to speak, but still stuttered. He was completely unable to say the words "it to me." "Senior brother, you're being too petty. How can you ask for the return of something that you've given away?" Linghan didn't even turn his head. He merely laughed loudly and left. This pendant was of great significance. If he snatched it away, it would probably be even more painful than giving Li Changdan a good beating. In fact, it would make him feel even worse than being seen naked too by others. Because in Linghan's opinion, Li Changdan's personality belonged to the cunning and reserved type. Even if he was humiliated, he could endure it, and then wait for an opportunity to take revenge, just like a venomous snake. Therefore, Linghan only took away the most precious thing of the other party, which would make Li Changdan's heart ache whenever he was to think about it. The fog surged, and it quickly covered Linghan, disappearing him from Li Changdan's field of vision. Woo! Li Changdan cried like an injured wolf. He had lived for 21 years. Aside from when he was very young, the moment that he started cultivating, he had become a genius that everyone had to look up to. After so many years, he was too used to enjoying the admiration of others. But at this moment, it only took one battle, and all of his glory had vanished into thin air. This let him know that he wasn't as strong as he thought. Linghan placed the pendant right in front of his eyes, and examined it carefully. This pendant was carved out of purple-colored wood. As for what type it was, Linghan couldn't recognize it. After all, his understanding of this world came from the optical computer, and there was no complete introduction. Moreover, this was most likely a material from the ancient era, and had long been extinct. The pendant looked very ancient, and yet appeared to be quite ordinary. He really couldn't make out what was so special about it. There were no formation patterns on it, which was beyond Linghan's expectations. Then how did he break through the fog? Linghan discovered that holding this pendant did not have much of an effect. Should he wear it around his neck? However, the thread was already broken. So how could he hang it around his neck? This shouldn't be the reason, but rather there was a need to stick it close to the body. Linghan thought for a moment, wiped the pendant, and then kept it close to his chest. Instantly, the fog in front of him dispersed. As expected. Linghan pondered whether this was really due to the need to stick it close to one's flesh. Not necessarily. He wasn't an ordinary person, but an existence that had once reigned supreme in a world. Sticking it close to the body, was it so that it could absorb the body's heat, or was it because there was blood circulating in his body? Let's give it a try. Becoming a master through blood bonding is also something quite common. He cut his finger and let the blood drip onto the pendant. Instantly, Linghan felt his hand tremble slightly, as if something was gushing out of the pendant. It could not be seen, but it was indeed there. The strange thing was that the blood on the pendant was completely absorbed in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Linghan observed it carefully, and discovered that this pendant had become even warmer. Purple qi filled the air, and it looked like a piece of jade. The change in the pendant itself might not be obvious, but one could clearly see that the area of the mist dispelled by the pendant had increased. This meant that the drop of blood was effective, and had indeed strengthened the pendant's effect. Why didn't Li Changdan do that? Blood bonding was a very common occurrence in the small worlds of the Genesis world, ancient realm, or the celestial realm. Why didn't Li Changdan give it a try? Linghan thought for a moment, and couldn't help but smile. It was common in the Genesis world, but here? Who would let himself bleed for no reason? After all, the martial arts here had just begun to rise, and everything was still in a state of ignorance. It didn't matter. It was now in his hands anyway. It was none of his business if Li Changdan didn't make any progress in his study of it. Linghan strode forward. The pendant was working, dispelling the fog within a few feet of him. Although this wasn't much, it was enough for Linghan because he had a considerable understanding of formations to begin with. Soon, he arrived at the exit. "Will many people be shocked to see that I'm the first to walk out?" he muttered, but his footsteps did not slow down at all. After a few dozen steps, he walked out of the great formation. He Miaoyin was waiting at the exit. When she saw someone come out, she subconsciously thought that it was Li Changdan, so she hurriedly pounced over like a bird returning to the forest. Changdan. However, she was immediately surprised to discover that this person was not Li Changdan, but the brat who had humiliated her at her birthday banquet. It was because of Ling Han that she was forced to apologize to a lowly maid. Every time she thought of it, she felt humiliated. Although He Miaoyin had already managed to stop in time, Ling Han still moved to the side as a gesture of giving way. It was clear that he despised her attitude. He Miaoyin was already extremely displeased, and now she was almost angered to death. Senior sister, I heard that you and senior brother Li are about to get engaged. Your behavior isn't too good, right? Ling Han purposely acted embarrassed, as if He Miaoyin really wanted to throw herself into his arms just now. He Miaoyin was stunned, and then she realized that Ling Han was teasing her, which caused her to almost lose control. However, she still suppressed the anger in her heart, and said in a low voice, "Why did you come out? Where's senior brother Li?" Ling Han chuckled, and said, "I think I saw that senior brother Li seeing that a junior sister was in trouble and he went to help her. I came over first." How was this possible? Of course, He Miaoyin wouldn't believe it. Li Changdan knew what this competition meant. At such an important moment, how could he be so ignorant? "You're talking nonsense," she snapped. "Believe it or not, it's up to you." Ling Han ignored her. Sun Jianfang and the other elders of the sect had already walked over, and so did the other disciples of the sect. All of them had expressions like having seen a ghost. It was actually Ling Han who was the first to walk out of the Great Formation and win first place in the audition. In other words, he was the Dao child of ancient Dao sect. He Guan was first shocked, and then in disbelief. In the end, he calmed down, while his face turned extremely gloomy. He was too disappointed. In order to pressure Sun Jianfang, he had paid a huge price to get Tan Jing, Laro Feng, and Qi Wu to agree to help him, creating an excellent opportunity for Li Changdan. In his opinion, who could be Li Changdan's match under such conditions? Yet it just so happened that the first person to walk out of the ancient formation was actually Ling Han. In other words, not only had He Guan paid such a great price for nothing, he even allowed Ling Han to ascend the position and become the ancient Dao sect's Dao child, as well as the next sect master. Trash, Li Changdan, this trash. Sun Jianfang laughed loudly. The reason why he had agreed to confirm the candidates for the Dao child in advance and used such a method was because he had had full confidence in Ling Han. As expected, Ling Han did not disappoint him. "I hereby announce that Ling Han is the Dao child of the ancient Dao sect," Sun Jianfang announced to everyone as he turned around. Chapter 31-26, 31-26 Mission. Chapter 31-26, 3126 Mission. 3126 Mission. After becoming the Dao child of the ancient Dao sect, the treatment received by Ling Han immediately improved by leaps and bounds. First of all, his residence had been shifted. He had moved from the foot of the mountain to the foothills closer to the mountain. Although Sun Jianfang had established the ancient Dao sect, in reality, he had only discovered a fifth scripture of the ancient Dao sect in this place. He hadn't obtained the true inheritance of the ancient Dao sect. Moreover, upon the transformation of the heaven and earth, only this small portion of the ancient Dao sect had been revealed. Most of the structures were still buried in the mountains. It wasn't that the ancient Dao sect didn't want to excavate them, but there were formations sealing them off. No one had the ability to do so. However, after moving some positions, Ling Han discovered that there were some unknown trees planted around the courtyard. Normally, there was nothing unusual about them, but when he cultivated in the morning, he could gather the power of heaven and earth, making a certain kind of mystical power in the courtyard even more abundant. Therefore, if he cultivated here, his efficiency would increase by about 20% in comparison to his original residence. Although it was only 20%, with constant cultivation for a period of time, the results would be staggering. No wonder Li Changdan was keen on the position of Dao child. Just this benefit alone was already extremely astonishing. In addition, Ling Han still had a quota of 100 jade seeds per month, while as an ordinary disciple previously, he had only had 1 jade seed per month. Furthermore, The Tao child could learn 3 styles of the true 4-directional fists. The true 4-directional fists was extremely powerful. If it was suddenly used in battle, it was very likely to reverse the situation. Of course, this was under the condition that the strength of both sides was similar. Otherwise, if the difference in cultivation level was too great, not to mention the 3 moves, even using all of them would be useless. Ling Han was no longer interested in the 4-directional fists, but he also needed a secret weapon and a trump card. Thus, he decided not to use the demonic monkey fists unless he was unable to defeat his opponent. He spent some time practicing the 4-directional fists. With his comprehension ability of someone who used to be a heavenly venerate, this was naturally not difficult to understand, and he quickly mastered it. In comparison, this set of fist techniques was truly simple. Once one understood it thoroughly, one would understand it thoroughly. It wasn't like the demonic monkey fists, which was full of changes, and one would gain a new comprehension every time one cultivated it. The two were on completely different levels. That was true. This area could only be considered the periphery of the true ancient Tao sect. How good could the fist scriptures obtained here be? There wasn't even a cultivation technique. Ling Han nodded to himself. No cultivation techniques had appeared in this world yet. Perhaps there were some, but they were definitely pitifully few. However, as the Great Era advanced, a large number of cultivation techniques might appear one day. At that time, it would be difficult to surpass the people who were already in the lead. Thus, now was the best time for him to quickly catch up to others. Ling Han did not believe that he would lose to anyone in terms of cultivation with his ability when he reached the peak stage of meridian opening. After Sun Jianfang taught him the 3 styles of the 4-directional fists, he was still waiting for Ling Han to ask him if there was anything he didn't understand. However, after waiting for a long time, he still didn't see Ling Han coming over, which caused him to feel puzzled. Could it be that this Tao child's comprehension had fallen to rock bottom? After so many days, he still couldn't comprehend a little of these 3 styles of 4-directional fists. He called Ling Han over to inquire about his progress. "How's your fist training going?" he asked. "It's all right." Ling Han was very humble. "What do you mean it's all right?" Sun Jianfang was annoyed, but when he thought of Ling Han's freakishness from before, he couldn't help but restrain himself, and said, "Show me, no matter how much you've grasped." "All right." Ling Han began to practice the 3 styles of the 4-directional fists. The corners of Sun Jianfang's mouth immediately began to twitch. So this was the reason why Ling Han had never looked for him. Damn it, he had encountered a monster who had actually completely learned it. Even with his cultivation that had been immersed in this set of fist techniques for over 100 years, he was still unable to find the slightest flaw in Ling Han's fist technique. Sigh, some people were really born for martial arts. That was all he could think. Go and cultivate diligently. Don't slack off, he instructed. Yes. Ling Han left and cultivated with all his might in his residence. Young master, Huan Shui ran over. Since Ling Han had moved here, she had also come along, and continued to be Ling Han's little maid. This made everyone sigh ruefully. At first, they had thought that she had been extremely silly for giving up her identity as a disciple of the ancient Tao sect and insisting on being a maidservant. However, looking at it now, she could also cultivate in a place that was meant to be used by the Tao child. How many people were envious of her? What's wrong? Ling Han asked with a smile. Li Changdan and He Miaoyin's engagement has been cancelled, she announced the big news. Ling Han gave an O, not finding it strange at all. The He family valued Li Changdan's potential, and thought that he could lead the He clan to greater heights in the future. However, Li Changdan actually lost in the Tao child competition. Naturally, this made the He clan change their mind. However, Ling Han felt that the He clan was a little short-sighted. Although Li Changdan had lost his position as the Tao child, he could still be considered a talent. He still had a promising future. Of course, if Li Changdan didn't know what was good for him, and insisted on making Ling Han his enemy, then his future would be a dead end, and the He clan's decision wouldn't be wrong. Let's see how Li Changdan makes his choice. How could Li Changdan give up? In his opinion, That pendant was too important. He had gone through countless dangers to obtain it, and it had also helped him obtain many opportunities. This was a precious treasure, and it was incomparably important. Thus, he naturally had to seek its return from Ling Han. Ling Han directly gave him the cold shoulder. First, Li Changdan had sent Zheng Tongfeng to lure him into depravity, and then provoked the hatred of Tan Gaobua and the others to target him. How could Li Changdan not compensate him with something? This was the residence of the Dao child. Who would dare to barge in? Li Changdan didn't dare to act recklessly. He could only run back angrily. After this battle, Li Changdan's prestige in the ancient Dao sect had plummeted to rock bottom. Now, everyone was discussing how long it would take for Ling Han to completely surpass this once proud prodigy. Ling Han knew that Li Changdan was probably going to take the risk. He didn't dare to make a move in the ancient Dao sect, and even if he did, it would be impossible for him to do so. This was because Ling Han had already buried the 3 formation foundations around his residence, and it was actually effective. He had turned this place into a small-scale psychedelic formation. While it did not suppress his cultivation level, this was enough. Ling Han practiced cultivation techniques and fist techniques every day, and spent the rest of his time studying formations. In this world, alchemy was tied to formations. Because he had changed to a better place to cultivate, Ling Han's advancement was naturally much faster. 2 months later, he cultivated to the peak of the 5 meridians. Subsequently, he naturally sensed the 6th meridian easily. He was called over by Sun Jianfang again. "I have a mission for you," Sun Jianfang said. "What mission?" "Go to the Jade Dragon Mine and investigate the situation there." "Jade Dragon Mine?" Sun Jian explained to him, and only then did Ling Han realize that the fact that the ancient Dao sect had so many jade seeds was because they were actually all mined. These mines were also the foundation for a sect to continue developing. The Jade Dragon Mine belonged to the ancient Dao sect, and it was located on the other side of Haiping Mountain. Because there were no other forces nearby, there were no elites stationed to guard this mine. But now, the Jade Dragon Mine hadn't sent any jade seeds for half a month. Chapter 3127 Investigating the Mine. Chapter 3127 Investigating the Mine. 3127 Investigating the Mine. Ordinarily, the Jade Dragon Mine would send a batch of jade seeds every 10 days. This was the sect's greatest source of income. Then, these jade seeds would be distributed to every disciple. But now, half a month had passed, and the latest batch of jade seeds had yet to be sent over. This naturally attracted Sun Jianfang's attention. He had thought that it was only because of the weather that they had been delayed for a day or two, but the expected delivery had already exceeded the limit by 5 days. This wasn't right. Sending Ling Han instead of an elder was to establish Ling Han's prestige as a Dao child. Only by doing more things could one gain prestige and be trusted. "This is a talisman weapon." Sun Jian handed Ling Han a piece of paper that was suffused with a yellow hue and exuded a hint of antiquity. "If you really encounter great danger, drip your blood on this and throw it out." Talisman weapon? Ling Han took the yellow paper, and was slightly surprised. There was such a thing in the Genesis world as well. A great elite would attach a portion of their battle prowess to a tool through a special method. When thrown out against an enemy, it could unleash a terrifying might. However, it was not triggered by blood, but by divine intent. Sun Jianfang could actually make talisman weapons. This was passed down from ancient times. "I also found it in the ruins of the ancient Dao sect," Sun Jianfang explained. "There aren't many such talisman weapons. Furthermore, because it has been too long, its power should have been weakened. It can only attack with the power of 10 meridians." What did 10 meridians mean? Ability to release mystical power. Therefore, even though it was just a piece of paper, it could unleash great power. Sun Jianfang still treasured Ling Han very much. He had bestowed him with a 10 meridians level talisman weapon, so if Ling Han went to a small mine to investigate the situation, even he should not have any problems. "All right, I'll set off immediately." Ling Han nodded. He was currently in the early stage of 6 meridians, but his power had already reached 8,500 kilograms, which was comparable to the early stage of 8 meridians. Coupled with the demonic monkey fists, he would just barely be able to put up a fight against Li Changdan if they were to meet in battle, even without the suppression of his cultivation level. Therefore, with the addition of a talisman weapon, he was full of confidence. Go, be careful. Sun Jianfang waved his hand. Ling Han returned to his residence and made some slight adjustments. He rejected the little handmaiden's suggestion to accompany him, carried his long sword, and left the mountain. With Li Changdan's many years of connections, even if his reputation had plummeted as the saying went, a centipede dies, but never falls down, he was still capable of some feats. He could not be underestimated. This guy wouldn't give up such a good opportunity, right? 6 meridians to fight against 9 meridians, and he was at the peak stage of 9 meridians at that. Ling Han did not think that he had any chance of winning, unless he threw out the talisman weapon. However, this was the last resort. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then began to take a roundabout route, weaving through the mountain forests, and choosing all the paths that no one would take. Now that he had more than 5,000 kilograms of strength, it was naturally much easier for him to cross mountains and ridges than before. After spending some effort, he arrived near the Jade Dragon mine 2 days later. Because of this mine, a village had been built here. The miners usually ate and lived here, and they would only return to the town once in a while. Of course, the miners here were all ordinary people. Only 13 supervisors were disciples of the ancient Tao sect, and one of them was the leader. His cultivation level was 8 meridians, and his abilities were not considered weak. With him here, he could even kill a ferocious tiger with a single punch. Ling Han arrived at the village, and immediately felt that something was amiss. Even though it was afternoon, and the miners were supposed to be working in the cave, the entire village was as quiet as a ghostly village, which naturally made him feel that something was amiss. Where did everyone go? The miners weren't around, but there had to be someone who would start a fire and cook. As Ling Han walked through the village, his long sword was already in his hand. Although he had yet to grasp any sword techniques, it was still better to hold a sword in this sort of situation. Whoosh! A mountain breeze blew over. It was clearly September, but there was actually a chilling feeling to it. Ling Han's footsteps were very light. He walked from the entrance of the village to the back, and didn't discover a single person. He also observed carefully, but didn't find any traces of a fight. It seemed that the people here had run away on their own, so nobody caused any damage. Otherwise, even if they encountered a super elite, it would not be so peaceful, right? Ling Han started from the end of the village, searching house by house. Empty, empty, empty. When he was about to reach the village entrance, he finally found a clue in one of the houses. In fact, he didn't know if it was a clue or not, but it was a scale the size of a fingernail. Judging from its shape, it was impossible to determine which animal it had fallen off. The other clue was that it had a fishy smell. Although it was only a scale, the smell it emitted was incomparably dense. It was also because Ling Han had detected this fishy smell that he had gone to look for the source of the fishy smell, which was why he had found this scale. Could it be that a ferocious creature had appeared and eaten all the villagers here? Was that possible? There were 13 ancient Tao sect disciples here. The strongest one even had the cultivation level of 8 meridians. What kind of ferocious creature could not be defeated by them? In fact, not a single person survived. In that case, such a ferocious creature had to be at least 9 meridians or in fact 10 meridians. Ling Han frowned. If such a ferocious creature really appeared, then if he was to continue investigating deeper, it would pose a threat to his life. He heard light footsteps. Had a survivor returned? Ling Han walked out of the door. Shua, a cold light flashed past, slashing towards his head. This attack was fast and ruthless, and its power was even more vigorous. In such a strange place, Ling Han naturally would not be careless. He had long been prepared to face danger, and thus he immediately parried the attack with the longsword in his hand. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and he felt his right hand go slightly numb. However, this attack was also neutralized by him. But at this moment, another cold light shot over. There was more than one person who made a move. Ling Han's feet shifted, and he dodged this attack. His entire body felt a bit of pain. After the exchange of blows, he was still able to forcefully make such a change despite the fact that his power was surging. This was truly too much. However, the third attack came as well. Ling Han had used up all his power, and it was impossible for his body to change directions again. How could he neutralize this attack? Nothing was impossible. Ling Han channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique, and the power in his meridians once again channeled inconceivably, providing him with an endless supply of power. With a great flip, he finally dodged the third attack. There was no fourth attack. 3 people appeared in front of Ling Han: Rui Yuanliang, Yong Fei, and Li Changdan. The 3 of them actually joined forces. Ling Han thought for a moment, and gave an O in his heart. Yang Fei and Rui Yuanliang had been humiliated badly enough by him during the Dao Child selection, while Li Changdan had lost his position as the Dao Child, and had not been able to become the son-in-law of the He clan because of this. Thus, the 3 of them hit it off right away. Haha, this Li Changdan was cautious indeed. He was clearly at the level of 9 meridians, but he didn't choose to act alone. Chapter 3128, 3128 Pursuit. Chapter 3128, 3128 Pursuit. 3128 Pursuit. Li Changdan and the other 2 were also very surprised. They had launched a sneak attack, had an advantage in numbers, and also had the advantage of cultivation level, yet they were still unable to kill Ling Han? What kind of luck did this kid have? You're really lucky, Rui Yuanliang said balefully. Don't waste your breath on him. Kill him. Yang Fei's eyes shot out a cold light. He really hated Ling Han to death. Ling Han had caused him to show his buttocks in public, making him not even dare to show his face in public. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "You guys really have schemed seriously. You actually followed me all the way here. Ling Han, today will be the day you die. This place will be the place where your bones are buried." Rui Yuanliang laughed coldly, and took the lead to launch an attack. He brandished a large saber that shone with a cold light in his hand, and slashed it towards Ling Han's neck. The power of his 8 meridians surged, and his battle prowess wasn't weak at all. Yang Fei also brandished his sword, slashing towards Ling Han. Li Changdan didn't make a move. He was like a sinister viper, looking for the best opportunity to strike. His caution was reasonable. Otherwise, Ling Han would have directly taken out that talisman weapon. With the power of the 10 meridians erupting, so what if the 3 of them joined forces? Perhaps they would be instantly killed. Ling Han also took out his long sword. Ding, 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 he continuously clashed with Rui Yuanliang and Yang Fei. His current strength was not much weaker than Rui Yuanliang's. Compared to Yang Fei, he was actually more superior. Thus, he was not at a disadvantage in a 1-on-2 battle. However, he wasn't in the 10 meridians yet, so he couldn't release his power, and he couldn't attack at close range when wielding a sharp weapon. Thus, he couldn't unleash the power of the demonic monkey fists. Otherwise, with the support of his left hand using the demonic monkey fists, his battle prowess would naturally be even stronger. Even so, this was shocking enough. During the selection, Ling Han had relied on the suppression of the ancient formation to defeat Yang Fei and Rui Yuanliang, but now? Without the slightest bit of cultivation level suppression, he was still only at a slight disadvantage in a 1 versus 2 confrontation. He was simply freakish. Li Changdan's expression turned ugly. Although it was easy to cultivate at a lower cultivation level, he was not like Ling Han, who had only used a few short months to reach a height that others could only reach in a few years. He was hesitating whether he should make a move. "Senior brother Li, what are you hesitating for?" Yang Fei shouted. "Let's attack together and kill this guy. Li Changdan, this was your idea. Why are you hesitating now that things have come to this?" Rui Yuanliang also said. If they did not have Li Changdan's powerful suppression, it would be impossible for him and Yang Fei to kill Ling Han. If he couldn't win, wouldn't he run? Li Changdan was different from these two. He had almost become the Tao child, so he naturally had a better understanding of martial arts. Sun Jianfang had many rare treasures in his possession. This time, he had sent Ling Han out alone. Would he not bestow one or two to him so he could protect himself? In any case, Li Changdan didn't believe that Ling Han had not been given anything. Thus, he was worried that if he couldn't kill Ling Han, then allowing Ling Han to take out a rare treasure, it would have unfathomable consequences. Putting everything else aside, as long as Ling Han could escape to the sect, then Li Changdan would be charged with murdering the Tao child, and would definitely die. Thus, today he would either have to kill Ling Han, or he would have to escape from the sect and wander the world. He had no choice. He had to take a gamble. Otherwise, the glory that belonged to him would never return. All right. Li Changdan nodded, but took a few steps back. He picked up a palm-sized rock from the ground, and threw it at Ling Han. Force couldn't be released, but power could be thrown out through a weapon. Xiao, the power of a peak 9 meridians cultivator was as high as 15,000 kilograms. In addition, Li Changdan was stronger than an ordinary 9 meridians cultivator. This power reached 17,500 kilograms. How terrifying would the destructive power be when enveloped around a rock that was thrown out? Even if it couldn't be perfectly unleashed, it was still more than 10,000 kilograms. This power far exceeded Ling Han's limits. If he was hit by it, Ling Han would definitely be sent flying. Ling Han dodged to the side, dodging the stone's attack. However, in order to dodge this attack, he was also almost struck by Rui Yuanliang's large saber, and broke out in a cold sweat. How could it be a joke when a 9 meridians attacked? Although Rui Yuanliang and Yang Fei were very dissatisfied with Li Changdan's actions, the latter still seriously affected Ling Han, after all. Thus, they didn't say anything else. As long as they could kill Ling Han, it would be fine. Even if it took a longer time, so be it. Xiao, 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 Li Changdan continuously threw rocks. He was abnormally accurate, forcing Ling Han to divert a large portion of his attention to cope with it. Furthermore, Ling Han had to dodge, and could not use his weapon to meet the attack. The difference in power was too great, and it was possible that a single strike would cause his longsword to slip from his hand. However, this way, Rui Yuanliang's power suddenly increased, and even Yang Fei's attack became something that couldn't be ignored. This was not going anywhere. Ling Han frowned slightly. Could it be that he had to immediately use that talisman weapon? The problem was that the talisman weapon couldn't be channeled for a long time. Right now, Li Changdan was just throwing stones at the periphery. It would be too easy for him to escape. At that time, he only needed to wait for the talisman weapon to run out of energy, and he would be able to charge his way back. At that time, there would really be no way out for Ling Han. Xiao, another rock smashed over with a whistling wind. This one was so fast that it was already close to the speed of sound, emitting a sonic boom. As it passed, the sound compressed and materialized. Go! Ling Han let out a long cry, and suddenly charged out of the battle, exerting all his strength to run. Where do you think you're going? Yang Fei and Rui Yuanliang chased after him. Although Li Changdan also started to chase after him, he still maintained a distance. Xiao, a rock smashed over, catching up to Ling Han at subsonic speeds, directly striking his back. Ling Han dodged to the side, avoiding this attack. However, because of this delay, Yang Fei and Rui Yuanliang had already caught up to him and launched a fierce attack. Fuck! Ling Han cursed in his heart, but there was nothing he could do. A 9 meridians was too powerful. Just Li Changdan alone was more than what he could match. This result was very normal. It couldn't be helped. He hadn't been able to learn the ancient formation. Otherwise, if he set up a large formation now and pulled everyone's cultivation level to the same level, so what if the three of them joined forces? Ling Han continued to run. If they were to start a battle in such an open area, the threat of Li Changdan's stone-throwing attack would be too great. Moreover, this place was like a natural armory, and there were stones everywhere. There was no need to worry that there would be no stones to use. Soon, a pitch-black cave appeared in front of Ling Han, exuding a sinister aura, as if he would never be able to come out after entering. This was the entrance to the Jade Dragon Mine. Ling Han gritted his teeth and sprinted into the cave. If they were in the mine, the power of Li Changdan's stone throwing would be severely limited. Not to mention anything else, the light was so dim. How could his aim be so accurate? Stop him! Li Changdan shouted. However, Rui Yuanliang's and Yang Fei's speed was not higher than Ling Han's. How could they stop them? Li Changdan was begrudging, and could only unleash his power. Peng, his speed instantly soared to the extreme, and layers of sound barriers appeared behind him, rapidly closing the distance between him and Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled, and took out the talisman weapon. Li Changdan immediately stopped. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.